Lucifer means Lightbringer presents the mythical astronomy of ice and fire. Sacred Order of Green Zombies. Part 6. The Horned Lords. Featuring Silas Thomas, San Rixie, and ideas of ice and fire.
And I'm your host, Element. And I'm here, rolling stag to Sacred Order of Green Zombies 6. We're representing different kind of Horn Lord, going with a little Stannis flavor, a little fiery heart, instead of the expected green Garth Horned Lord. But we're going to be talking about the fire that's inside the Weirwood Net. Azor Ahai penetrating, burning, and corrupting the Weirwood Net. And so I thought it was appropriate. And with me, I've got the same three folks from last week. I guess I'll just start. I'll start with my Hand of the Dragon this time, Sanrixian, who is with us from the beginning. Sanrixian, say hello.
Hello. Hi, guys. How are y'all doing today? I am really excited to be drawing some mystical stuff that we will get into later. I'm going to leave it a mystery now until LML wants to reveal it, but
Perfect.
I'm happy to be here, and everything's cool. I'm not mad at Lucy or anything. Don't worry. He's my bro.
I think I'm hearing that there might have been some echo. And I think I fixed it, guys, so let me know if there is any. Next, I've got Quinn from the Ideas of Ice and Fire channel. Say hello, Quinn. You are muted, my friend.
Hey, dudes. What's up? It's good to be here. I'm not going to talk that much this episode because my voice is a little bit tired, so yeah.
I wore him out with demanding audio performances all week. So Silas is actually gonna what we're gonna do is Silas is gonna read the quotes today, and we're gonna save Quinn's voice for a little bit of commentary. But we are still happy to have you, Quinn, and we appreciate you soldiering through to join us today. And of course, like I just said, Silas Toms,
hey.
Loki president, Gods of Terror blog. Say hello. Thanks for joining.
How y'all doing today?
Woo! And the crowd goes wild. They're going wild in the chat.
Woo, Silas, woo.
I could get used to that.
Yes, well, we thank you for joining us once again. We are going further into the woods with this Old Ones theory. So I've got some exciting fodder for discussion today. We're going to get about 2/3 of the way through, and then I'm going to drop a bomb. And I'm going to let everyone talk about it. And it's gonna agree a little bit with a very old video that Quinn did. So that'll be fun. We'll get to that. but yes, today is a very exciting day. We are talking about the Old Ones again. And just real quick, I'll give a 3-minute summary of what we did. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's I'm gonna make a couple of announcements. I've got a couple actually. So sorry, I'm kind of excited to talk about the Horned Gods, but we hit 10,000 subscribers on the Lucifer Means Lightbringer YouTube channels this past week. Thank you. I see this soft applause there. It's appropriate. So thanks everyone who has subscribed and who's shared the channel, shared the word, all that stuff, liked the videos, come to the streams. Thank you. Onward and upward. We are at 10,000, and I think we have lots of room to grow because, honestly, the attendance that we get at these live streams is, equivalent to channels that have a lot more subscriptions. So that tells me that we've got a lot of room to grow. So I don't know exactly how far long conversations about mythology will go in the world. I didn't think they'd go this far, so I'm excited, and I'm happy to keep pushing and see what happens. So. And I will also mention Joe Magician's channel. He hit 5,000 subscribers just this week. And of course, Joe Magician is, I don't know if he's a myth head or if he's like, what would you say, Sandra? Is he myth adjacent? Myth curious? What would you call it?
He's myth curious.
Yeah.
But Joe has a very analytical mind, and he is so focused on numbers and how would you say, like explaining and deducing things, I think. And he's trying to branch out from that. But yeah, congrats to Matt. Yay, Matt.
Yeah, we can't claim his career has been long established before we myth heads began cavorting. So we can't claim any sort of credit for that. But at the same time, we do love our wizard, Joey McWizard. So and real quickly, I'd also like to shout out Shakespeare of Thrones because she has a YouTube channel now. And if I could get one of my mods to drop the link for that. She just did something really cool. I think today is like some sort of Shakespeare Sunday or something like that. So Lauren's really cool. I just feel like giving her a shout out. So if I get a Shakespeare of Thrones link dropped in there, give her some love, give her a subscription.
She is amazing, and she made the most beautiful weirwood tree last year at Con of Thrones.
And she just did a cool write-up about Ned and Brutus. And yes, she was a beautiful weirwood tree at Con of Thrones. You're right.
And that was a great essay. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend you guys check that out. Her Shakespeare stuff is awesome. Nice.
Well, Sandri, if no one drops it in the chat, maybe you can pull it up. But I'm sure somebody will. I'm not sure who's there, but in any case, give her some love. So big announcement here. Myth Heads are covering Game of Thrones Season 8 this year. I have not really covered it at all in the past. I've gone on other people's channels and talked about it. But this year, we are going to cover it. We as Myth Heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn... And remember, there's only 7 episodes. Is it 6 or 7?
I think it's 7.
It's 7, I think.
Yeah.
7. So there's only 7 episodes this week. So for those 7, or this season, so for those 7 weeks, we're going to take our normal 3 o'clock Eastern hour, and we're going to turn it into a pregame show. We're going to go 2 hours or less, because at 5 o'clock Eastern, In Deep Geek is doing his pregame show. And so what we'll do is sort of a handoff thing. And I don't think we'll need more than 2 hours for that. And then here's the really exciting part. We are going to throw our hat in the ring for doing a post-game show. And there is a few post-game shows. Smokescreen's got the famous one, of course. He does a great show. Azor Hype, our friend Kyle, he's got a post-game show with JR Raleigh from Geek Chat and Secrets of the Citadel. So that's happening. But what we're going to do is we're going to do basically kind of a short, quick reactions post-game show right after the show's over. We're not going to even wait a minute. We're going to go live, maybe just go like an hour, and it'll be, you know, me and the Myth Heads. It'll be whoever is around and available, and it'll also include people like Quinn and Silas. You're welcome. I haven't officially invited you, but I am now officially inviting you.
Awesome.
Gray Area said she's willing to drop in. Aziz willing to drop in. Joe Magician, Bookshelf Stud, as well as, you know, folks like Emma Smith and Crowfood's daughter and Melanie, and of course Sandrixian. And so essentially, I'm not sure who will be there. Also, Bronze Steries will be joining us on some of these panels as well. Bronze Steries, the wise old dragon. So essentially, what we'll do is we'll give the quick reactions right after the show, go for about an hour. And then during the week, we'll rewatch and come up with some, you know, deeper analysis. And of course, we'll be looking at uses of symbolism and mythology and magic. And we'll have an eye towards the implications for the book because, you know, we Myth Heads are definitely book fans first, I think. So we're not going to cover the show exactly like everyone else. We'll cover it in our own Myth Head sort of centric fashion. But what it'll be is, you know, we'll rewatch it during the week. And then the next week when we do the pregame show, we'll also have like more thoughts that we had from last week, deeper analysis, as well as what we expect to happen this week. So it'll be fun. And, you know, we figure... might as well have fun with it. It's the last season. There should be lots of fireworks. They're going to take all the armies and smash them together. And, you know, we won't necessarily put a rose on everything. We'll be critical if we need to be, but for the most part, we'll probably have fun with it. We'll have Quinn on to be extra critical because Quinn, that's what you're good at, right? Hating on the show.
Yeah,
I'm just
and nothing else.
Oh, that's not true. It's
no, Quinn.
It's mostly true. Quinn is very entertaining when he hates on the show, though. So that's the
That's what they say in the comments. Like, this is all you do is hate on the show.
It's like they
Oh
say.
no! You know your theory videos and your excellent
And
Dune
all the other stuff
analysis.
that I do, I make like one Game of Thrones video a month.
So the thing is, Viseria, I see people asking about a post show on Mondays. There's lots of other people that are going to be going during the week. History of Westeros is going to have a thing during the week, and Gray Area be putting out videos. In Deep Geeks got a bunch of stuff during the week. There'll be lots of people doing stuff during the week. So I am going to keep my weeks clear so that I can catch up on some of the mythical astronomy work. I'm like behind in audio editing, and I got to catch up with Patreon names and all this stuff. So I will enjoy the 7 weeks off of scripted episodes, and basically we'll just be doing live stuff on Sunday and having fun. And if you watch the show on a delay, you could just watch our reaction show on a delay too right afterwards. So it is what it is, but there'll be plenty of live streams to get involved, and I'll be popping up on other people's streams. I'll be on History of Westeros a couple times, and there'll be plenty of times to hang out with everybody. So don't worry about your scheduling. There's going to be lots of coverage, guys, lots of coverage. So that's that. We'll be covering the show. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing y'all there. And Quinn, yeah, where are your subs on YouTube? Are you hitting a milestone here? Are you close to a milestone?
Last time I checked, I'm at like 130,000. So I guess the next milestone is 150.
Damn, dude.
10,000 points for House Quinn.
Well, you certainly deserve all that kind of success, man. You've been going at it for a while and making just amazingly high quality videos. So cheers, man. Cheers.
Yep.
All right. So I see the chat reacting to that. Everyone looks excited. So yeah, lots of fun stuff. I personally like going on live right after the show. There's a lot of excitement after the show. People like talking about it right after it happens. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be good. And like I said, it'll just be a quick reactions thing. So I think Azora Hype was saying, like, in his live show after the show, he was getting like 800, 900 viewers. So I think there'll be even more attention this year. And of course, Smokescreen gets tons. So there'll be lots of people. It'll be kind of crazy, I bet.
We might even make some new myth friends.
We will make some new myth friends. That's essentially what we'll be doing, is drawing in more people into our myth head crowd, because you gotta have fresh blood, Yeah.
We are so community. That's
Totally.
our brand.
Totally. And I will say that you're going to enjoy Bron Sterry's the analysis of Bron Sterry's The Wise. He is very tuned into the show, rewatches it a lot, and he thinks that D&D are in fact putting some nods into some of the deeper book theories, like things like the Green Sea, Under the Sea. He thinks that they're playing with that. So does Ravenous Reader. So his viewpoint will essentially be the D&D know about the deeper mythology in the books and are putting nods into it. I kind of like want to believe, but I'm skeptical. If you guys remember when we had the God's Eye episode that I did with Aziz after they did all those cave paintings that look exactly like the God's Eye eclipse, and they got the others in the Long Night and lots of planets and astronomy. Like I got pretty excited thinking that maybe they were going to give us eclipses or meteors in the show, but then they sort of had the others break through the wall and invade. We haven't had even anything really even hide the sun yet. So I don't know if they're going to do that or if they were just teasing us. But in any case,
I was going to say, as Alt Shift X pointed out in the episode where he had a shout out to you, he was mentioning the trailer for season 8 with the obsidian when the ice and fire collide. So I have a lot of hope, and maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I'm really excited.
Well, it'll be fun to ride that roller coaster, and I'll remain pessimistic but cautiously hopeful. So we'll see. We'll see if Bron Sterry's is right and we get more wish fulfillment for ourselves or what. So yeah, and quick reminder, please press the like button. Thank you, KFA. That does help the video get seen. So if you're watching and enjoying, take a moment to click the like button. And with that said, let us, okay, so I'm going to give you the quick summary of last week in case there's anybody tuning in that didn't see last week. This is going to be really quick. Basically, the old ones are the green men. And when we go around and look in the books, we find all these uses of the phrase old ones, which seem to refer to the green men. For example, there was the line that said, Ned's gods were the old ones, the lost gods of the greenwood, the nameless, faceless gods of the greenwood that he shared with the children of the forest. And so then you go on scene after scene, and we're pulling these quotes about the old ones. There's one where the jailer's name was Garth at White Harbor, and it said the old one was Garth, which is basically the theory in a nutshell, that basically Martin's playing with this Lovecraftian idea of the old ones, which are these sort of vanished gods, and sort of tying that into the lore and mythology of the green men, who basically seem to be the first green seers. And so essentially the old gods of the weirwoods that we think about as the hive mind of green seers as being mostly children of the forest. My theory is that essentially the first green seers were actually green men who might be related to the children of the forest. They probably are, I would say. So that's essentially the summary. And with that, you should be ready to follow along. So welcome to Sacred Order of Green Zombies 6, The Horned Lords. Hello there, friends, patrons, and fellow mythheads. We are 6 episodes deep into the Green Zombie series here, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're going to dive right in. And having just met the real green men in the last episode, it's time to start sacrificing them. That's right. Cernunnos may be a handsome stag boy, but he is fated to die. Silas, take it away.
Few of the very oldest tales of Garth Greehan present us with a considerably darker deity, one who demanded blood sacrifice from his worshippers to ensure a bountiful harvest. In some stories, the green god dies every autumn when the trees lose their leaves, only to be reborn with the coming of spring. This version of Garth is largely forgotten.
Very nice, Silas. You have an excellent reading voice. Thank you. This will be good. I was worried you were going to suck. No, I'm kidding. Very good, though. We have a lot of nice reading voices in the community. It's a treat, I will say. I mean, nobody's Quinn, but,
Bow before me. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, my master. So Cernunnos, the original stag man, the horned god, he specifically dies every autumn. And of course, the related oak and holly king mythology, which divides the horned god into winter and summer brothers, essentially, revolves around one stag man brother killing the other every 6 months to sort of make the seasons turn. This is simply a depiction of the way that nature seems to die in the fall, or perhaps we might say it loses its green. Thus, the horned god, who in all his forms is an embodiment of the forest and the virility of nature, tends to kick the bucket as late autumn and winter comes calling. Of course, all hope is not lost, because we know winter doesn't last forever, and nature's green mojo will be back with springtime. Unless, of course, you live in Westeros, and winter simply doesn't go away. Then, instead of green men returning to life in the spring, instead, we get all manner of messed up zombies and White Walkers and shit. The White Walkers are so bad in this kind of cold, sunless environment that it turns out people actually ended up rooting for their own zombie heroes to save the day. That is, of course, according to the Green Zombies theory on which this series is based. You'll recall that nature psychomythology is really what helps to put George's extensive use of zombies in context. Since the big evil of the story is a winter and a night that will not end, George figures that it makes sense to play with the Green Man mythology in dark and twisted ways. Our heroes are resurrected green men, just like real-world folklore, but since they're resurrected in the winter, before their appointed time in the spring, they come back as sort of messed up green zombie Night's Watchmen. People like Cold Hands, or even a little bit like Barrack. It's not necessarily a pretty picture. We're all waiting to see what it will be like for John in the books, of course, but we know it figures to be a lot different and a lot darker than the Jon Snow from the HBO show, don't you know? And that's the good guys. The enemy, the ancient icy enemy known as the Others and their army of the undead, well, they are very much monsters who are tailored to the setting in which they appear. Cold white shadows which emerge from the dark of the wood, which George R.R. Martin refers to as icy she. They have always read like the darkest instincts of the woods come to life, like pissed off elves turned ice and snow and bad intent. The whites, on the other hand, are the logical symptom of a night and a winter which will not end. If the cycle of the seasons and the cycles of day and night are stuck, well, then natural life and death cycles figure to be disrupted as well. And since night and winter correspond to the death part of the life cycle, we get unnatural death to go along with unnatural winter and an unnatural eternal nighttime. The army of the living dead. And one of the mysteries about all of this is that both the others and my theorized green zombie Night's Watchmen are tied to the Weirwoods. The green zombies are tied to the Weirwoods because every scene which reenacts the green zombie ritual has a Weirwood symbol at its heart. And most occurrences of the last hero math, which is, of course, 12 plus 1 for the last hero and his 12 companions, contain a Weirwood symbol as well. We can also deduce this from the available information about the last hero. Old Nan tells Bran that it is at some point after he loses his companions that he receives help from the children of the forest. And then in the world of Ice and Fire, we learn that the Maesters have recorded that,
thanks to the children, the first men of the Night's Watch banded together and were able to fight and win the battle for the dawn, the last battle that broke the endless winter and sent the others fleeing to the icy north.
Hey, Blue Tiger. I see a Blue Tiger in the chat. Thanks for joining us, buddy. So Sam also reads in the records of the Night's Watch at Castle Black that the children used to give the men of the Night's Watch dragon glass knives. And we also know that before the Andals came to Westeros, pretty much all of the original Night's Watchmen would have worshipped the old gods and therefore would have sworn their oaths to a weirwood tree, just as Jon and Sam did. And according to the Green Zombies theory, this swearing of the Night's Watch oath to a heart tree would actually have been part of the original resurrection ritual, as the newly resurrected Green Zombie essentially swears the life he's just been given back to the Green Seers in the Weirwoods, the people who just gave him back that life or unlife. So as you can see, the first Night's Watch received help from the children, any way you slice it. And the first Night's Watch was presumably led. Sorry, let me just say that sentence over again. So as you can see, the first Night's Watch received help from the children of the forest. And the first Night's Watch was presumably led by the last hero, who also received help from the children of the forest. So if the Green Zombies did exist, then they would basically owe their unlives to the magic of the Green Seers and the Weirwoods. Now the others, on the other hand, are also called the White Walkers of the Wood, and they seem to come out of the trees to emerge from the dark of the wood, as it were. We've been investigating the others throughout more than 2 compendiums, and for a long time now, their symbolism has been seeming to suggest the others as having somehow been evicted from the Weirwood net. Lately in the Signs and Portals series, we've seen a variation of this theory emerge, which is that there may have been some sort of partition drawn across the original Weirwood net, with the others essentially being exiled to the frozen side of the Green Sea of the Green Seers, much as the Wall effectively exiles the wildlings from the rest of Westeros. Both eviction theories are similar, and at the core is the idea that Azor Ahai seems to have forced his way into what we call the Weirwood net, and that this somehow resulted in the casting out or eviction of the others from the Weirwood net, either from the Weirwood net altogether or exiled to their side of it. Thus we have black brothers and white others, both named as Watchers and both named as Shadows repeatedly. They've always seemed like mirror images of one another, and the Green Zombies theory points at a common origin for both, the Weirwoods. So today, we are going to shed some very exciting illumination on these mysteries. We will be proceeding as we were when we left off in Green Zombies 5, which is reading all of the quotes that contain the phrase Old Ones, and looking for symbolism which matches the other Old Ones scenes that we've looked at, and also the Horned Lord mythology at the root of it all. Garth the Green Men, the secrets of the Isle of Faces, and the War for the Dawn. The Old One scenes that we'll look at today will give us a lot of fresh ammo to consider as we try to suss out how all this got started, and how it is that the Weirwoods seem to stand at the junction of ice and fire magic, of brothers and others. All right, so that's my little intro section. Silas, thoughts?
Loving it. Yeah, I think the Horn Man are the key to the whole thing. obviously, and the intersection of Norse and Lovecraftian myth that you've called out here. It's really smart because I think Lovecraft already was tucking in a lot of Norse myth to begin with. I think that's where he got a lot of his ideas from. You know, Cernunnos is basically incorporated directly in, and a couple of the other Norse gods as well. So, yeah, loving it.
Nice. And Quinn, as I mentioned, you know, definitely the first video I saw from you, and one of the first videos that made an impression on me when I started looking at videos about A Song of Ice and Fire was your video about the others as Icy She. So give me a couple minutes on that and your thoughts on that based on what I've just been talking about, specifically the idea of the others being evicted from the Weirwood Net.
So the others being, okay. So George R. R. Martin based the conflict of the Children of the Forest and the First Men somewhat on pseudo-Irish mythology that involves the Aishi versus the Milesians, who represent mankind, who came across the sea from Iberia. And so in that mythology, the She do things like create storms to prevent them from coming, and they use magic against them and stuff like that. Basically, the She are the nature spirits, and they live in trees. Basically, they protect nature. They fight for nature. And that story is really similar. And in the end of it, basically what happens is they split the world, and the Aishi get the underworld, and then mankind get the outer world or something like that. Basically make a split that's similar to what happens in A Song of Ice and Fire. But what's interesting though is the idea of
Quinn, if I could just jump in real quick. I mean, that's the partition theory right there. I mean, I kind of knew that. I don't know my Norse myth that well. And my Irish folklore, which is, I guess, related. Sorry, I'm misspeaking. Irish folklore, I know even less, really. I'm just learning it from other people and a little bit of Wikipedia. But that, now that I hear you say that again, I mean, that is the partition idea exactly. This is the others being exiled, not just north of the wall, but like to their own side of the Weirwood Net. So that's pretty cool. But go ahead.
But yeah, I was just going to bring it back to that. I was going to say it's interesting that I like the way that you talk about the Weirwood Net as kind of like this kind of like, what's the word? Just kind of like an ethos of just all these different consciousnesses and different things can inhabit it. And it doesn't just belong to like one group or entity. You know what I'm saying? Like anything can join it, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a real exciting idea. I began to notice it when we began to pick up signs of a battle inside the Weirwood Net. And actually here, I'll give a little bit of credit to the show. The first time I saw Night King confront Bran inside the Weirwood Net, essentially, inside the Weirwood Dream, I kind of, hey, look, we got John Walsh guitar. Hey, John, that's our resident flamenco guitarist.
Yay.
Who is, yeah, that's nice of him to drop by. That's cool, man. I know he's been catching up on some back episodes after like sort of getting busy with real life. So yeah. Oh, he's excited. We're talking about he's from Ireland. So he says, there are trees in every country here, Ireland, that landowners will not cut down because of superstition tradition that they are fairy trees. Yeah. I wouldn't fucking cut down a fairy tree either, man. That's a good way to get some others haunting your dreams. And that's kind of the whole thing about nature spirits and Cernunnos is that they're not all like happy forest elves. Like if you encroach or harm or cut down trees and stuff, they will be vengeful. They will cut your ass. They will sacrifice your ass to the gods and whatnot. So that's a big component of what we're going to talk about today, actually. So thanks, Quinn. And of course, Disputed Lands, or one of my other mods, Melanie, Lot 7. Hello, ladies. If you could search through Quinn's videos and grab that video and drop it in, it might even be on his front page because it's like one of your most popular ones, right?
Yeah, it's the first one in my Song of Ice and Fire Theories playlist.
There you go. So just head on over to the Ideas of Ice and Fire channel. And if you're jumping in late, Quinn is under the weather and joining us anyway. So if you're speaking a little quietly or not as much, that's why he's patching it together there. So we appreciate that. He's got a rattling voice like Cold Hands today. So Very, very good. So there's more. We probably could make some hay by exploring that whole Fomorian's Aishi kind of thing and applying it to some of what we've done. But let's do the episode that we have today, and we'll circle back with that another time. And by the way, guys, the John Walsh YouTube channel is super easy to find. Just put in John Walsh guitar. If you don't add the guitar, you'll get the America's Most Wanted John Walsh. And that's not what you're looking for. So there you go. All right. Let's read some Patreon names. And cue up some spooky music. Did he have antlers? This next section is brought to you by the earthly avatars of the 12 houses of heaven. Direliz, the Alpha Patron, a descendant of Gilbert of the Vines and Garth the Green, earthly avatar of Heavenly House Aquarius. Lord Leopold the Victorious, the Fire Lion of Lancasterly Rock, earthly avatar of Heavenly House Leo. Turin the Elf, Tavern Keep of the Wine Spring Inn, Master of the Abyss, earthly avatar of Heavenly House Cancer. And Durin Durandon, the Redfish Bluefish, and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Pisces, whose eyes are ruby and sapphire, and whose sword is pale fire. And Outer Panda, the Pan Doubter, the man in the mirror man, and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Gemini. All right, how's the volume balance there? Could you hear the names? Was that good, Sanri?
It is very good.
Way better.
Excellent. Yes. The elusive audio balance has been achieved. Oh, and just going back to the beginning, Ridiculous Ed Tollett dropped in a 420 super chat. Thank you, Ridiculous Ed. Thank you. And guys, if you send in super chat questions, feel free to do that. Sanrixian is watching for them. She will grab them and stick them in our little YouTube chat, and I will grab them in the section breaks. So that's how we'll handle that. So, did he have antlers? The wall is a major site of Old One's activity, which stands to reason, since the green zombies are tied to the Night's Watch and the wall. The wall is also in the class of ancient, unexplained mysteries of Westeros. Is it possible that? This list also includes places like the Isle of Faces, Storm's End, Battle Isle, Moat Cailin, and the Winterfell Crypts. And if there's a lost race of antlered green men on the Isle of Faces, it may be that they had something to do with some of these other mysteries, particularly those tied to the War for the Dawn and the Night's Watch. Many of these places are also linked to Bran the Builder, it should be noted. And one more, by the way, some of you guys like to read along. The text for this, I did add it to the description of the YouTube channel. This video right before we started. You might have to refresh the video to see it if you tuned in before like 12 o'clock on the button. And I'll just drop it in the chat right now. There is the text link. So, Bran the Builder, all these mysterious places. Now, we've already seen Jon speak of praying to the Old Ones while manning Castle Black against the Magnar of Thenn and his invading wildlings. And in case you forgot, the line there was, "Pray then," Jon told him. "Pray to your new gods, and I'll pray to my old ones." We're going to come back to that chapter and that battle at Castle Black a bit later today, because there are other Old Ones sightings there. But to start, let's have a look at what may be my very favorite Old Ones quote. At least after that, the Old One was Garth line from the Wolf's Den at White Harbor, which really can't be beat, since that's basically my Old Ones theory in a nutshell. The Old Ones were Garth people, cousins of Sir Nunos, horny folk. This one, however, is nearly as good, because it includes talk of cold hands and the green men.
Was he green? Bran wanted to know. Did he have antlers? The fat man was confused. The elk? Cold hands, said Bran impatiently. The green men ride on elks, old Nan used to say. Sometimes they have antlers too. He wasn't a green man. He wore blacks like a brother of the Watch, but he was pale as a white with hands so cold that at first I was afraid. The whites have blue eyes, though, and they don't have tongues, or they've forgotten how to use them. The fat man turned to Jojen. He'll be waiting. We should go. Do you have anything warmer to wear? The black gate is cold, and the other side of the wall is even colder. Why didn't he come with you? Mira gestured towards Gilly and her babe. They came with you. Why not him? Why didn't you bring him with you through this black gate too? He can't. Why not? The wall is more than just ice and stone, he said. There are spells woven into it, old ones and strong. He cannot pass beyond the wall. Grew very quiet in the castle kitchen then. Bran could hear the soft crackle of the flames, the wind stirring the leaves in the night, the creak of skinny weirwood reaching for their moon. Beyond the gates, the monsters live, and the giants and the ghouls, he remembered old Nan saying, but they cannot pass so long as the wall stands strong. So go to sleep, my little Bran, my little baby boy. You needn't fear. There are no monsters here. I'm not the one you were told to bring, Jojen Reed told Fat Sam in his stained and baggy blacks. He is.
Nicely done. That's one of my favorite passages. Good job, Silas. So, the spells woven into the wall, presumably during its creation, are old ones. This is one of the deep mysteries of the story, the origins of the wall. Its building is attributed to everyone from the first men to the children of the forest, to the giants, to perhaps even the others themselves. But it might have something to do with the old ones. Who are the green men? Were these spells made by the green men, or perhaps made with the power of the green men? Another factor to consider here is blood magic, which is said to be, and appears to be, the most powerful type of magic in this universe. That's the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, not our actual universe, of course. Ygritte says that, although, blood magic is very powerful, let me just tell you. Ygritte says the wall is made of blood. So there's definitely a possibility that powerful blood magic was used in its making. In fact, I'd actually say that it's more than a possibility. When Ygritte says, "You know nothing, Jon Snow," it's essentially as good as something coming from old Nan, I think. And when she turns to Jon and utters the ominous words, "This wall is made of blood," I think we're supposed to regard that as a glimpse at the deep truth of the wall. Given that sacrificial death is such a big part of Ser Nunos lore and Garth lore, it's possible that the Old One's magic used here at the wall involved blood magic, either green men performing sacrifices or being sacrificed themselves. Then we have the fact that the person telling us about these Old One spells is Cold Hands, who rides an elk like a green man, but is dead. He's been sacrificed. Altogether, the clues here seem to point to blood magic involving the green men, perhaps even the sacrifice of green men. Now, when we speak of green men, ritual sacrifice, and powerful magic, we have to think of the stories of powerful blood magic being performed on the Isle of Faces to call down the Hammer of the Waters, especially since we see this weirwood reaching for the moon and trying to pull it down into the well right after the talk of the green men and the spells of the old ones. If I'm right about the Hammer of the Waters being a moon meteor impact, and I am right, hopefully, then a weirwood reaching for the moon with wooden fingers makes a lot of sense. It's a symbolic depiction of green seer magic being used to reach up and break the moon, something which seems to have been fueled with blood magic any way you slice it. So consider the Hammer of the Waters myth alongside the Azor Ahai myth. The Azor Ahai myth shows us the blood magic killing of Nissa Nissa having the power to break the moon, and we think Nissa Nissa was an elf woman, a woman with either the blood of the children of the forest or the green men. The classic Hammer of the Waters legend, on the other hand, shows us green seers sacrificing either captive humans or their own young to drop the hammer. And the line there was, 1,000 captive men were fed to the weirwood, one version of the tale goes, whilst another claims the children used the blood of their own young. But if the hammer was a moon meteor, then breaking the moon and dropping the hammer are the same thing, the same act. And look, both things are accomplished with blood magic ritual sacrifice, quite possibly the killing of what we might call elves, either children of the forest or green men. As I've said before, I suspect that the green seers who dropped the hammer by breaking the moon were not children of the forest. I believe they were green men, the old ones, just as Robert, the horn god, runs around like a horny Garth, swinging a giant hammer. It's called a clue, people. The horned lords dropped the hammer, but the twist may be that they themselves might not have dropped the hammer, but rather might have been sacrificed by Azor Ahai to break the moon, just as the legend shows Azor Ahai sacrificing Nissa Nissa to break the moon. Nissa Nissa may not have been the only elf killed by Azor Ahai. One thinks of the parallel myth of Brandon of the Bloody Blade, who was implied as either killing or impregnating many children of the forest and giants near Red Lake. Azor Ahai may have slaughtered the green men in order to gain access to their trees, with Nissa Nissa's sacrifice being the capstone of some sort of extremely dark ritual. An important parallel here may be the killing of Renly, dressed in his glorious and Garth-like green stagman armor when he was slain, because he was slain by a shadow version of Stannis, who is a dark Azor Ahai figure. That scene has a lot of Long Night imagery, with all the candles blowing out and Renly's last word being cold. Renly's death gains Stannis the army of the Reach and a stronger claim of kingship, which matches the idea of Azor Ahai gaining power by killing green men. Stannis's dream projection penetration of Renly's green tent, the magical castle alive with light, can be seen as Azor Ahai's penetration and corruption of the Weirwood Net. And again, we see that killing green stagmen is an important part of this. Another relevant parallel would be the Ironborn king Euron Redhand. Red Hand is a Weirwood symbol because of their blood-red hand-shaped leaves, and indeed, King Redhand is caught red-handed by history as having won his crown by killing 13 captive kings and priests. Won his crown by killing 13 captive kings and 50 priests inside of Naga's ribs, which are really made of weirwood. Naga's ribs function as a kind of weirwood grove here, and the ribs are even said to have run red with the blood of the slain. So taken together with the red hands thing, there is strong evocation of weirwood sacrifice here. The last hero math in this context is a nearly irresistible symbol. And our murderer, Euron, well, he has a name which links to Euron Crowseye and Eurython Nightwalker of Karth, who might be Euron's alter ego, actually. And both of those characters seem to fit the evil Azor Ahai mold. I mean, we know Euron Crowseye does, and Eurython Nightwalker is known for his glass candles, which are Valyrian sorcery. Put it together, and you have evil Azor Ahai slaughtering 13 people with special blood, call it king's blood or whatever you want, inside of a functional weirwood grove. Something like this may well have went down at the Isle of Faces, either in connection to the blood magic that broke the moon or the green zombie ritual, which would have come a bit later. We've yet to sort all that out. So here I'd like to check back in with Sanri, because she is drawing, as you might have guessed, the Isle of Faces, which I speculate has a big oily black obelisk. That is not canon. That is David Beer's headcanon right there. But wouldn't it be nice, right?
And I'm trying to do some kind of like corrupted looking weirwood trees, because visually, to like call back to what Quinn was saying earlier, like the evil, and you guys were saying earlier, rather in the earlier part of the episode, the kind of like evil corruption, the others are the bad weirwood spirits. This is how I'm visually interpreting it, basically. As
Nice.
kind of like creepy, spooky, definitely Majora's Mask inspired trees. So
I like
I
the
thought-
ghostly stags. Those are good looking.
the elks and the green men's.
Yes. I like the one on the far left, who's just
This
kind of a kind of a blob
Yeah.
looking dude. I like that one.
Cool.
Nice. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm seeing some compliments in the chats. And Sandry, have you been watching for super chats? I think I saw one fly by.
I kind of spaced out for a second. Let me check.
Steven Stark 666 says, "Everyone say hi to my daughter Lorian." It's Daddy Daughter Day. Steven, quit watching the stream, and well, I'm sure you're being responsible. But anyways, hey Steven, and hey to Steven's daughter, Lorian. That's a nice
Hi,
name.
Lorian.
Lorian.
We love your dad.
Hello.
Disputed Lands 666. Another super chat. Love it, guys. Horns high, horns high.
You satanic people.
We're the worst.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Well, an obelisk just kind of makes sense. KF3, he's asking why an obelisk. I speculate that there's some sort of oily black stone. It could just be a big hunk of stone. Maybe it's a toad statue, the long lost twin to the other one. Maybe it's a statue of something else. Maybe they carved it into an elk or a blobby Cthulhu monster. But obelisk kind of makes sense, just Bloodstone Emperor seems like an obelisk kind of guy, in general.
It's this one particularly is inspired by obviously Egyptian obelisks. So there's a lot of parallels between Bloodstone Emperor and some of the Egyptian mythical deities, I believe, that we have covered before, correct?
Yep, and a lot of what you would call Western occult magic draws heavily from Egyptian lore, or even pseudo-Egyptian lore sometimes, but it's a squishy line, who knows. Anyways. All right, so how much time goes into this level of investigation, John Walsh? Lots and lots of time. That's why I'm kind of behind on everything. But I'm here, and I've got the script for you, so let's get back to it. There's yet another, and I'm going to leave it on Sanry for a minute while I talk. Another parallel leaps to mind here. Daemon Targaryen carving the Weirwood Heart Tree in the Harrenhal Godswood, which is right by the Isle of Faces, with 13 last hero math slashes of Dark Sister. If you recall, he was waiting for Aemond One-Eye to show up and fight him, basically. And while he was waiting, he carved one slash in the heart tree every day. So there's 13 slashes on that Weirwood still that bleed every spring, supposedly. So that's pretty good stuff. You've got an Azor Ahai figure giving a last hero math and a face carving. And it's got a Lightbringer symbol in Dark Sister. And of course, this is right before he goes and fights a Night's King figure, Aemond One-Eye, riding a dragon above the God's Eye Lake and the Isle of Faces. So that kind of seems like something there. I would say that's basically the last hero, raising his zombies, his group of 13, and then going to face the Night's King. That's what that smells like to me. So another possibility is that when Azor Ahai killed Nissa and forced his way into the Weirwood Net, he, quote-unquote, killed the green men in a less literal sense by killing or altering their spirit home. Azor Ahai symbolically set the Weirwoods on fire when he invaded, which may have effectively killed the green men, Old One spirits that reside in the Weirwood Net. Or it may have driven them out. More on that later. In Stannis' killing of Renly might represent the Weirwoods as a whole, just as the green man, or Cernunnos, represents nature as a whole. And murdering Renly might simply represent Azor Ahai penetrating, burning, and corrupting the pristine green sea that existed before he came. And I think, Sanry, you are unmuted currently. Got your table noise. There we go. I've speculated that before Azor Ahai's invasion, those bonded to the Weirwood trees might have been able to do so in a more, quote-unquote, natural way, one which may not even have involved carving horrible bloody faces into the trees, and essentially, according to my thinking, hollowing out the consciousness of the Weirwood trees so that humans can live inside. That's what I think is happening, which kind of makes the Weirwoods like white trees, WIGHT white trees, almost like a hollowed out zombie. Now, this speculative older form of Green Seer Weirwood bond might have been more like the classic setup between a tree and a dryad, or like the Aishi and their mounds, for example. And I'm picturing the green men as this older form of natural Green Seer. I mean, they do live on the Isle of Faces with only Weirwoods for company, so it would be weird if the green men didn't have any ability to use their magic. It'd also be very boring if they couldn't access the Weirwood Net. They'd basically have nothing to do. But in any case, it stands to reason that a Cernunnos-like stagman creature would play a role like this, as that is the classic role of Cernunnos and the other horned gods. They're the protectors of the forest, even an avatar of the forest itself. Garth the Green planted Weirwoods at Highgarden, after all, and the descendants of his firstborn son, the powerful kings of House Gardener, ruled from atop a throne of living oak, the Oaken Seat. So it sounds like Garth had a pretty strong relationship with Weirwoods. Now, speaking of House Gardener, I will briefly mention that this oldest and proudest line of Garth the Green was burned from the fabric of existence by Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya at the Field of Fire, an act which greatly helped to win Aegon his throne. In fact, it was the burnt swords from the Field of Fire, as well as Harrenhal, which went into the making of the Iron Throne. So once again, we have an Azor Ahai dragon figure gaining power and kingship, literally making his throne through the slaughter of green men. And the armies of the Reach essentially count as green men in this instance. So in somewhat similar fashion, the oaken seat of House Gardner was chopped up and burned by a Dornish king during the rule of Garth X. And Highgarden itself was also burned. So that's a lot of burning the Weirwood net symbolism right there. The old and feeble-witted Garth X was found tied to his bed by the Dornish, which is awesome green seer symbolism. He's old and feeble and tied to his bed, just like Bloodraven is pinioned to the Weirwood roots. And then his throat was cut, which completes the Garth sacrifice symbolism to go along with the burning of the Oaken Seat and Highgarden. So that's pretty clear symbolism, right? Sacrificing green men, setting the Weirwood net on fire. They are simultaneous actions. So then returning to Bran's scene with Sam at the Night Fort, where we started, consider again the importance of the presence of cold hands in this scene that talks about green men and the spells of the old ones. Since Cold Hands checks out as both a green man figure, riding elks and talking to the birds and protecting the forest and being allied with the children of the forest, but he also happens to be an undead Night's Watchman. I've suggested that before the pact between the children of the forest and the first men, I've suggested before that the pact between the children of the forest and the first men, which was supposedly signed after the Hammer of the Waters fell, is actually where the Night's Watch was formed. The legendary history, of course, has the Hammer and the pact taking place thousands of years before the Long Night. But as I was just saying, the idea that the Hammer was a moon meteor called down at the time of the Long Night necessitates a rewrite of this timeline, which I think makes a ton of sense. Ergo, the pact would still have been signed shortly after the fall of the Hammer of the Waters, but that's now happening during the Long Night. As I like to point out, it makes sense for the pact to be signed during the Long Night because that's exactly when the first men would have been desperate enough to yield to the children, give up their own gods, and adopt the gods of the children, despite having previously outmatched the children of the forest. Plus, we already know that during the Long Night, the children were said to be involved in the formation of the Night's Watch and that they helped the last hero. So there's an awful lot of partnership and alliance going on between the humans and the children of the forest during the Long Night anyway. So again, to me, this makes sense for a time to sign the pact. So according to this thinking, the pact would essentially represent the formation of the Night's Watch. And this would probably be when the resurrection of the green zombie Night's Watchman through the use of green seer magic took place. The pact was said to take place on the Isle of Faces and involved the carving of the faces into all the Weirwood trees and the formation of the Sacred Order of the Green Men, which quite honestly already sounds like a green zombie resurrection party as it is. To put it simply, the Isle of Faces is a great place to create the first green zombie Night's Watch, whether or not this was the same thing as the Sacred Order of Green Men or something separate. I mean, you know how tangled all this history gets. It could be that the green men were always on the Isle of Faces, and that it was actually the green zombie Night's Watch which was formed on the Isle of Faces when the pact was signed. Now, I want to make sure everyone is clear about the supposed legendary events at the Isle of Faces, as this can get confusing. There are, again, supposedly, two different events. There's the sacrifice of either captive humans or children of the forest to call down the Hammer of the Waters, and then later, sometime shortly after, we had the signing of the pact, where the face carving was done. Here's the thing, though. Bloodraven says that the purpose of carving a face on a weirwood tree is to enable a new green seer to see out of those eyes. And there are some clues that awakening a new heart tree might involve blood sacrifice. So you kind of have to wonder if maybe the face carving and the massive ritual sacrifice happened at the same time, or at the least that these two events may be linked. Maybe they happened right after one another. So consider this. According to the legend, the green seers were feeding captive to the weirwood on the Isle of Faces to drop the hammer before they carved faces on the trees. But doesn't it make more sense to give the trees faces and then feed them sacrifices? I mean, I don't know. Let me pause here and get some opinions. Silas, what do you think about this, my rewrite of the timeline here? You're muted.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm still, very unclear about the Isle of Faces. It's to me, I can't tell if they're waiting like for the next event, and they've been placed there forever, basically, or if like the whole thing about the pact depends on them being there, and I'm still confused about it. So you could convince me of anything, I think, with them, because they're so it's so hard to tell, basically.
Well, here. Let me incorporate some more. Okay, and yeah, Jojo Lady Dane is also mentioning that there are also legends of the Hammer of the Waters being called down from Moat Cailin. So that's probably another thing worth clarifying.
Yeah.
There are two different stories that we get about where the hammer was called down from. In the books proper, initially, we're told that the children called it down from Moat Cailin, the children's tower at Moat Cailin. It's not until the World of Ice and Fire that it says the Green Seers gathered to call down the hammer, some say on the Isle of Faces.
Yeah.
So essentially, some people think there are two different hammer events, which I do not think is the case. But you can understand how some people would come to that opinion, because maybe they broke the arm of Dorn, calling it down from the Isle of Faces. They fought a bit, retreated a bit, and then they tried again to break the neck. And, it's the same idea, but just, further back, essentially. So maybe that does make a certain amount of sense. And of course, I could be wrong about my theory. But essentially, what I think is that it was called down probably from the Isle of Faces, and that there's something else that happened at Moat Cailin that's sort of getting mixed up in all this. I mean, Moat Cailin sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
It looks like a squisher palace, like Yin from Sothorios or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it compares very well to Yin, honestly.
Yeah, big blocks laying around. And it's also confusing to me, too, because there's 3 towers, right? So you've probably, if it's symbolic of like a pact between magical people and humans, then you've got the Children's Tower, you've got the Drunkard's Tower, right? And then there's the other one, I think. So did you have 3 different groups occupying 3 different towers that were fighting against something else? It's very interesting to me. And also, like, how it's right at the neck, which got submerged from the Hammer of the Waters. So it definitely is connected to some ancient battle. You know what I mean? I think like one big battle, and I can't tell if like I don't think it's between the children and the humans. I think the humans and the children were working together against something else. Is my guess.
Yeah, and I think that essentially the reason that makes me think this is all one event is because when you look at the Iron Islands, we find all this really heavy sea dragon symbolism, fractured land, meteors falling into the water, all that stuff. And the Iron Islands is really close to the neck.
Yeah.
So to me, what I'm seeing is like, if the moon fractured or broke or anything like that, we're going to get more than one meteor, probably more like a storm of swords, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining a few different simultaneous impacts. And so you'd have the neck and the arm flooding and broken at the same time. That's my thinking. But again, it's theoretical.
No, I'm with you. The only, I see people talk about a rise in sea level too. But the only thing is that if you read the section about the Jogos Nye, they call this the dry times, right? There was like the great inland seas that dried up on both sides of the bones. And
that's consistent with the global climate temperature rising. You'd get a drying out in the deserts and a sea level rise at the same time.
Well, yeah,
I think that's what we're seeing.
But like, it just makes you wonder if like there was, if it, I think it has more to do with your moon meteor theory than the sea level rise. Like that makes more sense to me. And if like the wall and having the land of always winter being so frozen, if that's what's affecting and creating more of the dry times as well, like if there's some relationship there on the global climate level of this world.
Well, I definitely think there's evidence that all the climate changed around the world after the long night.
Yeah.
It was such a kind of, the seasons themselves were thrown out of whack. So anytime something like that happens on Earth, you get a mini ice age because of a volcano or an impact event, it always, changes all the climate cycles. So, all right. Quinn, what do you think about, specifically, I want to get back to the whole theme of the pact. The thing that really resonates here with me is not the evidence of the meteor impacts and where they fell and all that crap, but the idea that humans and children of the forest, the time that they would have been working together the most is during the long night. And then we have the story about the pact. So it already makes sense to me for those things to be happening at the same time. And then the meteor evidence for the Hammer of the Waters basically dictates that that's the case. So what do you think about all that?
Well, yeah, we've talked about discrepancies in the timeline before. So, like, I always say that when it comes to thousands and thousands of years, there's nothing that we can really know for certain. So we have to imagine that a lot of these stories have been passed down, by the way, from person to person, like through oral tradition mostly. Like, no one has been like writing all of this down and keeping an accurate account. So it is more than likely, I think, that what we're presented in the beginning is not the whole truth and is probably inaccurate, and there's probably things mixed around. There's probably things that have been split apart or merged together as far as like individuals or places or timelines when specific events happened. So I'm always down with some theorizing on discrepancies in the timeline, and I have a bunch of my own ideas too. But yeah.
Cool. So setting aside the question of what exactly the order of the events happened on the Isle of Faces, I do want to make the point that the face carving supposedly happened shortly after the hammer fell. But if the hammer was really a long night moon meteor, then this means the face carving was done around the time that Azor Ahai would have been invading Westeros. I like this a lot because I've always seen the face carving as something that was done against the will of the trees, something that marks the invasion of the trees against their will, without consent, if you will. Azor Ahai is the one invading the Weirwood Net, so it figures that he's the one carving the faces or causing them to be carved. And once again, you think of Daemon Targaryen literally carving the face of the Weirwood there. Now, at this point, I can hear Bronn Sterries, the wise old dragon, asking the question, so what exactly do you think happened here? It's the kind of question he likes to ask. We talked about some of that just now, but based on what we just discussed, I think the evidence is pointing the most strongly towards the green zombie ritual, and thus the formation of the Night's Watch occurring on the Isle of Faces. I also think it's looking like the blood magic ritual to break the moon may have occurred there as well, though I think that's less certain. There are also stories that the hammer was called down by the Green Seers at Moat Cailin instead of the Isle of Faces, as we just discussed. And there's always the possibility that Azor Ahai did his blood magic ritual at Asshai as well. Still, at the end of the day, there was some reason that Azor Ahai needed to come to Westeros, and access to the Weirwood Net is the most likely reason. If so, the Isle of Faces would seem to be the place. So that was a bit of a digression into Hammer of the Waters talk, but if we want to understand the Green Men, then we have to understand the events on the Isle of Faces. Now you can see why this chapter at the Night Fort is written the way it is. Sam shows up, talks about cold hands and the spells of the old ones. Bran mentions the Green Men, and then we see a Weirwood with an arm and fingers trying to destroy the moon. It's telling a story about the events of the Long Night, about the destruction of the moon with Green Seer magic called down on the Isle of Faces, perhaps, where the Green Men live, and about the creation of the Green Zombie Night's Watchmen like cold hands with that same Green Man Weirwood magic. Warding the first version of the wall with spells of the old ones against which no shadow can pass, which is where we started this section, makes a lot of sense as something this new alliance of Green Seers and First Men would do. By the way, I saw a Maura Lee super chat and a Jared Siegel super chat, both of them saying thank you, love the content. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Overall, I think the comparison between the Green Men performing blood magic on the Isle of Faces and the wall being built with the spells of the old ones, who may be the Green Men, works very well. One of the other places, which Melisandre says is woven with old spells that prevent shadows from passing, also happens to be tied to horned gods and Bran the Builder, just as the wall is. And that would, of course, be Storm's End.
There was no need, she said. He was unprotected. But here, the Storm's End is an old place. There are spells woven into the stones, dark walls that no shadow can pass, ancient, forgotten, yet still in place.
Joe Magician, I'm going to ban you from the chat if you're not careful. I'm not going to repeat his comment, but it's entirely inappropriate.
Ban him.
He missed my disclaimer earlier, to be fair.
No, he probably didn't. He's probably just trolling like a trolly magician. Not
Troll
Joe
magician.
Magician, troll magician. Yes.
Honestly, I
gathering.
couldn't restrain myself, especially earlier before you colored it in. It was like, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, let's be real here. Obelisks are supposed to be penises. I mean, that is what they are. There's no ambiguity about that. Like Lightbringer's about dicks. Obelisks are dicks. That's what they are. Washington Monument is a giant stone dick in the middle of our nation's capital. That's what it fucking is. And it changes color halfway through. I'm sorry, a little too much detail.
You're not wrong.
So there it is. Yes, it's a symbol of virility and fertility. And that's what we're all about today. So it's actually quite appropriate that we've got a horny obelisk in the middle of the Isle of Faces. Dicks everywhere. Yep, cock party. It is. Sausage party, as they say. This one's for the ladies. All right. So again, we see the spells are set to prevent shadows from passing. The shadow babies here at Storm's End, and dead things like cold hands at the wall, and probably the others themselves who are called white shadows. That's a fascinating topic on its own. So the oldest places in Westeros are warded against shadows and whites with spells? Sounds like something they came up with during the Long Night, no? It's also a potential connection between Storm's End and the Wall, which, again, are both attributed to Bran the Builder, maybe. The legends of Storm's End's creation also involve talk of the children of the forest shaping stones with magic, which is kind of hard to fathom, but maybe more easily attributable to the Old Ones, who did, after all, create underground cities on the Isle of Lang. Then there is that Ariane Martell TWOW chapter, early release chapter that we talked about last time, the one where she finds stone pillars, seemingly stalactites and stalagmites which have grown together, carved with faces that resemble heart tree faces, deep underground in the Rainwood near Storm's End. Perhaps this is a place that belonged to the Old Ones rather than the children, as Ariane and her company presume. Of course, if the Green Men / Old Ones really are some kind of stag man connected to the Weirwoods, they can surely be considered cousins to the children of the forest, and they're surely connected. Overall, it's an interesting picture here at Storm's End. Why did those Durrandon kings wear antlered hats anyway for all these millennia? Perhaps the answer is that the Green Men were active in this area the days of yore, and that they left their mark on local folklore, and perhaps on the stone itself. The tales of the ancient Durrandon kings here speak of children of the forest and giants, but Green Men are basically like, excuse me, but the Green Men are basically like giant children of the forest, so perhaps that's what's going on here. And I'll also mention that Brandon the Bloody Blade down at Red Lake was also said to be killing giants and children of the forest. So maybe he was killing Sir Nunos. Garth children. Now here's another thing to consider. Oftentimes in the real world and in A Song of Ice and Fire history, one conqueror, king, or warlord defeats another and takes their symbolism on in order to rule their lands. It's the whole floppy ears principle. That's how the Baratheons came to wear antlers. They essentially took over the ancient Durrandon seat of Storm's End, married into the Storm King's line, and sought to carry on his symbols of power. The Boltons have supposedly worn the skins of the Starks that they've slain. And then over in Essos, we have Huzor Amai, king of the Sarnori, who defeated the king of the Hairy Men and then wore his skin as a pelt. Perhaps Durin Godsgrief wore antlers because he slew green men in order to win his kingdom, and because the somewhat terrifying image of the Stagman was already imbued with power and mystique in that area. I would say it was both of those things, because Durin Godsgrief is an Azor High type who challenges and steals from the gods, and I believe Azor essentially slew green men in some sense, as we just discussed. In doing so, Durin and Azor themselves became horned gods in the sense that they stole the power of the horned gods. Also, at the risk of stating the obvious, wearing antlers makes you look a bit like a tree person with branches sticking out of your head. Thus, when you kill horned lords and steal their attire, it's akin to killing them and stealing their weirwood home, which is exactly what Azor Ahai did. Now, when I looked at the history here, I noticed that there are some Durrandon kings who war on the giants and the children, and some who are friendly with the children.
The god's grief himself was the first to claim the Rainwood, that wet wilderness that had hitherto belonged only to the children of the forest. His son, Durin the Devout, returned to the children most of what his father had seized, but a century later, Durin Bronzeaxe took it back again, this time for good and all. The songs tell us that Durin the Dour slew Lund the Last, king of the giants, at the Battle of Crookwood, but scholars still debate whether he was Durin the Fifth or Durin the Sixth.
Yes, I believe it was Durin the Sixth. Durin the Sixth, yes. And those who believe it was Durin the Fifth are just ignorant.
They're ignorant.
Yes.
They're so ignorant.
Nice. The wonderful, beautiful children. Oh, now Quinn gets it. All right. So there's the god's grief, taking the rainwood from the children, which means he probably slaughtered them. But then his son gave it back to the children. And one thinks of the idea that evil Azor Ahai's son became the last hero, a friend to the children of the forest and the weirwoods. Then there is another Durrandon king named Ravenfriend, which makes him sound like one who is pro-children and pro-Greenseer. And then when the Andals invaded, which was long after the Long Night, definitely, we hear of a Durrandon king who sounds like the last hero.
But King Baldric I Durrandon the Cunning proved expert at setting them one against the other, and King Durin the 21st took the unprecedented step of seeking out the remaining children of the forest in the caves and the hollow hills where they had taken refuge, and making common cause with them against the men from beyond the sea. In the battles fought at Black Bog in the Misty Wood beneath the Howling Hill, the precise location of which has been sadly lost, this werewood alliance deals the Andals a series of stinging defeats and checked the decline of the Storm Kings for a time.
The Disputed Lands is wondering if perhaps Lune the Last is the I am the last of the giants that the wildlings sing about. Could be. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So Baldric is a variant of the Eldric, Aldric, Elric name tree. And of course, these types of figures are always last hero, stolen other baby figures, as we saw in Blood of the Other series. And it's probably also a call out to Balder of Norse mythology, who has some Azor Ahai Somebody tell me who Balder is again. It's Mistletoe, right?
He is, Mistletoe, and he's also one of the sons of Odin. I think he's a thunder god. I could be wrong.
Is he the one who threw the mistletoe spear or got slain by the mistletoe spear?
Yeah, he's the reason we kiss under mistletoe.
But is he the one that got killed or the one that killed?
I think he's the one who killed. But I'm wrong. Somebody will correct us in the chat.
No, he died. Hodor killed him. So there you go. Balder the Beautiful. So yeah, that's
Balder. Sorry.
That's cool. So he was slain like a green man should be, and like the last hero was slain and resurrected. Well, everybody's answering at once. Okay, thank you. So helpful. Thank you, guys. All right. So that's pretty cool. Baldric, it's a good name. And somebody's piping in that it's Black Adder. What's Black Adder? Anybody know?
Not a snake?
Well, I mean, I know it's a snake, but Baldric is some sort of... it sounds like a TV show or something. Oh, Baldric the Cunning from the comedy series Black Adder. It's a British thing. Could be. But one of the thing is that Eldric name, the root name of Eldric is actually Aldric. That's the oldest form. So Baldric is a pretty good Elric, stolen other baby last hero name. And that was the point I was making. So his story is a last hero story. You can see what happens. Just to recap, he seeks out the children of the forest when the first men are hard pursued by the Andals. And of course, this is an interesting echo of the last hero story because it places a horned stag man as the last hero, who is part of a weirwood alliance with the children of the forest. The Andals make good stand-ins for the others due to their symbolism, which is another topic that we've explored elsewhere. But just in brief, think of their white marble septs like the Sept of Baelor or the Sept of the Snows at White Harbor, or think of all the icy crystal that the faith likes to use to decorate. So to me, this last hero parallel story alludes to the idea that the famous pact between the first men and the children of the forest occurred during the long night and not thousands of years before, and that the formation of the Night's Watch was part of this pact. The Night's Watch was certainly a weirwood alliance between the children and the first men, and the spells of the old ones may have been at work to raise the first black brothers from the dead. So pretty cool. That's a pretty cool little Easter egg, isn't it? That little story.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It really ties together. Like, it just makes it explicit, everything you're talking about.
And it's probably, you get the idea that, you know, since this was occurring during the fight against the Andals, this was well after the Long Night. But he probably, this hero, Baldric, was probably thinking of the stories of the Long Night when the children of the forest sought out, or when the last hero sought out the children. And he was like, I know what I'll do. I'll do what the last hero did and seek out the children. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And you always got to wonder about those timelines, of course. We really have no idea. But whether it's the Andals or some other group, it's a perfect tie-in to the last hero. Yep. And of course, tying it to Storm's End and Baratheon, House Baratheon is pretty cool. So again, I'll point out that this weird legend of the children having helped build Storm's End. Sorry, let me say that again. Again, I will point out that weird legend of the children having helped build Storm's End, as this also suggests a possible alliance between the ancient Durrandon and the children of the forest. The idea that there are old spells set into the walls of Storm's End, spells similar to the old one spells at the wall, lends credence to the notion that either the children of the forest, the green men, or the magic of one of those groups was in fact used to raise and protect Storm's End, most likely during the Long Night, when people would have been worried about magical shadow assassins. The same being done at the wall is really just common sense. One has to wonder what that first wall was made out of. Underneath all that ice, might there be a wall of fused black stone or oily stone? Sorry, I'll put the tinfoil away. All right, that's the section. Sorry, a little tinfoil there. I slipped out at the end.
I like it.
I do like
really
that
cool.
idea, though. Quinn, what do you think? Oily black stone under the ice?
I mean, yeah, sure. I like it.
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that when they're digging the tunnel through the ice at Castle Black, shouldn't they run into the stone? And they don't. So,
yeah.
There's that.
Unless they were just pillars throughout or something.
Oh, we go. It's not a wall, guys. It's a fence. Come on, it's a fence. It's not a wall. Just,
Blackstone flats.
Blackstone slats. Oh, that's awesome. Oh boy. Art imitates life, imitates art, imitates life. The Ouroboros of insanity.
Well, one thing we should talk about too is that the Durrandons being part mermaid, right? Sort of magical beings themselves. They may have been more inclined to, or have a greater connection with the children. Not sure exactly what it is, but
so I tend to think that the L&I mermaid symbolism is symbolism, and not that she's an actual mermaid. Although Disputed Lands will probably disagree with me there, and I'm not certain by any means.
Yeah.
But I think all that is Nissa should always come from the sea because she's a child of the forest or a green man woman that is connected to the weirwoods. So that's why I think she's often a mermaid. But
well, there's I wrote an essay about this a long time ago, but there's these reptilian water serpents. They're called Ukenta. There's a couple other names, but they're horned serpents, right? and they're very much tied in with Cernunnos because some depictions of him, he has either snakes serving him or his legs are actually snakes as well. So there could be some relationship between the horns of the Durandons and water beings that are horned serpents. You know,
That's interesting.
It could go even deeper than just a mermaid imagery. Yeah.
Well, the snake tree symbol also comes to us from the Garden of Eden snake and the Nidhogg serpent beneath Yggdrasil. So that's kind of and snakes are used to depict time, as are trees. So there's a lot of overlapping symbolism there. For sure. All right, Quinn, any thoughts you'd like to add?
No.
There's a lot of snakes in underworld mythology as well, and symbolism.
Yeah, and the one other thought too is that, like, you know, this whole story in essence begins with an antler, right, found in the direwolf, you know, and we always assume that it's from an elk or a stag or whatever, but we never actually see it, you know. It could be from something.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was from a Cernunnos.
Yeah, exactly. Or
That's
you
funny.
can't.
Well, of course, Renly breaks off a tine of his antlers in the tournament and then throws it to the crowd. So there you go. Your theory is proven. So guys, Silas's link is right in the description of this video. Just scroll down or hit the little down arrow so you see the full description. And there's a link to the Gods of Terror blog, or you can just search Gods of Terror and you will find it.
Gods of Terror.
That's these are some of the scariest weirwoods you've drawn yet, Sanri. This is good.
Thank you.
I think. Thank you, I think.
No, I was trying to argue of why I was drawing them spooky, but I like spooky weirwoods. I think we're all on the same page with there's some spook going on in the woods.
Oh yeah, I think they're plenty spooky. So Herman Bum's mom sends in a super chat and asks, if the seasons are messed up, how do they even keep time? Well, they keep time by measuring the movements of the stars and possibly the lengths of the day. There's an allusion to the maesters around Westeros making measurements, and that's how they know when the seasons are changing. We're not told what measurements, but clearly they're observing the movement of the stars and the heavens. So I don't know. It's magic. Don't try to figure it out. Let me get some more spoopy music. Let's see, what's this section called? Okay. Oh, this is one of my best section titles ever. Just telling you. No Stairway. This section is brought to you by Stina Fleming, aka Bulwer the Purple, helmswoman of the Cinnamon Wind and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Taurus. By Lady Shar, wielder of the Sacred Shard, Ice Priestess of the House of the Unsleeping, and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Scorpio. By John Old Blackheel of House Thompson, wielder of a Valerian steel tray of fish food and Kraken tacos, and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Ophiuchus. By Questing Beast, the Anger Ranger, keeper of the Dragon's Wrath, and earthly avatar of Heavenly House Virgo and Libra. And Servorian, the Warg of the Morning, wielder of the dual blades of Sunrise. And oh, that's a terrifying sound. I made that sound. I love this part. It's basically like the sound of doing DMT. If you've ever done DMT, it makes that sound in your brain. It's sort of a... That's literally the sound I was going for when I recorded that. Oh, we got a dog sighting. Let's stop talking about drugs and talk about dogs.
Oh, look at the precious lad.
Oh man, Quinn, you got the camera on you, buddy.
Oh, hey.
What's this handsome boy's name?
This is Major.
Major. Oh, he's a good boy. Just sits right down next to you. Look at that.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good baby.
Good boy.
You
Good
saved
boy.
me from incriminating myself on the air. Actually, you didn't. I incriminated myself, but that's cool. He's a handsome pupper.
Mm-hmm.
And the chat is losing its mind, of course. Of course. I'm going back to Sanrixian. Sanri, your drawing is excellent here. As egomaniacal as I am, I'm going to leave the camera on you because this is good. This is good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that means a lot. It's a big compliment. All right, so getting back to the wall, which we now know was built at least in part by the old ones. Let's talk about the Switchback Stair, an outstanding symbol that we've neglected for far too long. This is from a Sam chapter of A Feast for Crows.
Castle Black's keeps and towers rose above him, dwarfed by the icy immensity of the wall. A small army was crawling over the ice a quarter of the way up, where a new Switchback Stair was creeping upward to meet the remnants of the old one.
Uh-oh, the old one. Dun, dun, dun. That Switchback Stair, it's highly symbolic and significant, and it seems to have something to do with the old ones. I'm going to tell you right now, this stair is a symbol of a weirwood tree, and that's why it's a hub of old ones action. In the scene we just read, the Black brothers are repairing the burned section of the stair, which was sacrificed to win the battle against the wildlings. But check out this scene from A Storm of Swords, where John sees the stair before it was burnt, and after he's escaped Styr's group of wildlings and is approaching Castle Black at dawn.
As the stars began to fade in the eastern sky, the wall appeared before him, rising above the trees in the morning mists. Moonlight glimmered pale against the ice. He urged the gelding on, following the muddy, slick road until he saw the stone towers and timbered halls of Castle Black huddled like broken toys beneath the cliff of ice. By then the wall glowed pink and purple with the first light of dawn. From the ground, he could not tell if there were sentries walking up on the wall 700 feet above, but he saw no one on the huge switchback stair that climbed the south face of the ice like some great wooden thunderbolt.
As you can see, this is a great Dawn is the original ice, Sword of House Stark scene, with the wall lighting up and glowing with the dawn light. And there's the stairway to heaven. No stairway! No stairway! Climbing, climbing the ice like a wooden thunderbolt. This is the old one stairway, which is like a wooden thunderbolt. And of course, that puts us in mind of the storm god's thunderbolt, which set the fire of the god's tree ablaze, especially since this wooden thunderbolt stairway is destined to be set on fire. So it's basically all three symbols rolled together. Tree, thunderbolt, and then burning tree. So the thunderbolt motif is repeated again when Tyrion first sees the wall.
A wooden stair ascended the south face, anchored on huge, rough-hewn beams sunk deep into the ice and frozen in place. Back and forth it switched, clawing its way upward as crooked as a bolt of lightning.
Martin really wants us to think about this wooden stair as a bolt of lightning, it seems. And again, this wooden thunderbolt is eventually set on fire. Now, because the stair itself is a visual metaphor of climbing to the heaven, and they call it... No, I'm sorry, I can't sing Robert Plant. I'm not going to do that. It works well as a symbol of the thunderbolt because... Sorry, I screwed that one up. Because the stair itself is a visual metaphor of climbing to the heavens, it works well as a symbol of the thunderbolt which set the tree ablaze and gave the fire of the gods to man, an act which allows man to become like a god and thus ascend the stairway to heaven. I really want to sing this, but I just can't. I'm gonna resist. Be a good boy. So the basic message sent by labeling the old switchback stair as the old one after it's burnt would again seem to be to equate the old ones, the green men, to the weirwoods and their ability to transfer the fire of the gods to man. This fits with our analysis in the last section concerning Azor Ahai perhaps killing the green men to take their power. Setting the Old One's stair on fire is basically like setting the green man weirwood net on fire. After Jon gets back to Castle Black and warns everyone of the imminent wildling threat from Styr's group south of the wall, they make preparations to defend against this attack, and we get yet another good Thunderbolt description of the Switchback Stair.
So Castle Black had a wall of sorts at last, a crescent-shaped barricade 10 feet high made of stores, casks of nails and barrels of salt mutton, crates, bales of black broadcloth, stacked logs, sawn timbers, fire-hardened stakes, and stacks of grain. The crude ramparts enclosed the two things most worth defending, the gate to the north and the foot of the great wooden switchback stair that clawed and climbed its way up the face of the wall like a drunken thunderbolt, supported by wooden beams as big as tree trunks driven deep into the ice.
So Castle Black is now defended by a crescent-shaped wall of food, basically, which I found kind of amusing. There might be a cornucopia, horn of plenty joke going on there. But there's the stairway, clawing and climbing like a thunderbolt. And look, it's drunk. It's a drunken stairway this time. And she's buying Stairway to Heaven. Okay, that's the one I can sing. I used to live on Haight Street. I've heard that before. And I used to work at Guitar Center. So I've heard every bad. That's why I'm taking this out on y'all. I've got a lot of built up no stairway energy. It's all coming out. All right. So there it is. It's drunk. It's drunk with the mead of poetry and the fire of the gods, of course. Just like Odin, who's always drinking from his mead of poetry horn. Just to make sure we're thinking of the weirwood trees when we see the stair, we see that it is like a... I'm sorry. Just to make sure that we're thinking of the weirwood trees, when we see that the stair is like a wooden thunderbolt, George points out that the beams that support it are as big as tree trunks. One might even infer the meaning that the stairway represents the entire weirwood net, which is made up of many tree trunks. Not only do these thunderbolt tree trunks catch on fire, it's Jon, an Azor Ahai figure, who's one of the people who light it on fire. Yes, that's right. One of the people who light them on fire. Amazingly, it is right before he lights it on fire with a couple of other black brothers that we get that quote where Jon says to Satin, "Pray to your new gods and I'll pray to my old ones." It reminds me of Bran praying to the old gods right after he sees the weirwood trying to pull the moon down into the well, actually. Sticking with this same Jon chapter, here is the scene where Jon and Satin prepare to set the stair on fire.
"Fetch the torches," Jon told Satin. There were 4 of them stacked beside the fire, their heads wrapped in oily rags. There were a dozen fire arrows, too. The old town boy thrust one torch into the fire until it was blazing bright and brought the rest back under his arm, unlit.
So there is your last hero math. A dozen unlit fire arrows in the hands of the Night's Watch, and 1 lit torch to set them all on fire. This makes wonderful sense as it ties the last hero's group of zombie heroes to the burning wooden thunderbolt Old One staircase, which is really a weirwood. The green zombie theory has always postulated that the zombies are resurrected through weirwood magic, and that the Night's Watch swearing their vows to the weirwood trees is, as I mentioned, an echo of the original zombie-making ritual. Alternately, and more simply, you can just look at Jon and observe that it's an Azor Ahai figure setting fire to the Switchback Stair, the symbolic weirwood tree, which is consistent with everything else that points towards Azor Ahai setting the weirwood net on fire. So let's put this scene together, since Martin has again given us 2 separate Old Ones quotes that link together. Jon praying to the Old Ones before lighting the stair on fire, and the burnt stair later being labeled as the Old One. So the wooden thunderbolt Switchback Stair represents a weirwood tree being struck by lightning. You guys got that? And it's labeled as an Old One. So what's happening here is that Jon essentially prays to the Old Ones, the green men, and then immediately turns and sets their tree on fire. Now, this seems highly ritualistic when taken together, and it also reminds us that when Stannis offered Jon Winterfell and the Stark name a chance to be Lord Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell, the requirement was setting fire to the heart tree in the Winterfell Godswood. I think this idea of setting the tree on fire is, of course, symbolic, not literal, which is why Jon doesn't actually burn one, but through this road not taken alternate reality where Jon burns the Winterfell tree, and through this scene with Jon setting fire to the Switchback Stair, we can see that Jon is cast in the trademark Azor Ahai role of being the one who sets the Weirwood Net on fire. And of course, if you want to see the rest of the evidence about that, that's in A Grove of Ash. As I pull out my headphones, that's in A Grove of Ash, Weirwood Compendium 4. So what's relevant here is the implied presence of the Old Ones, who seem to be in the tree when it's set on fire. Once again, I believe this supports our emerging narrative. The Green Men / Old Ones / Garth people are the original beings, along with the children perhaps, who were bonded to the Weirwood trees before evil Azor Ahai killed Nissa Nissa and invaded the Weirwood Net. These actions permanently altered the Weirwood Net, I'm thinking, which was the home of the Green Men, Green Seers, before this. The Weirwoods are the home of the Old Ones, it seems clear. And since they are the Old Ones, they kind of have to be the originals, right? Or else they wouldn't be called the Old Ones. So there's a hint about Stagmen as Green Seers, actually, in this very chapter. Because this is also the chapter where, right before the fight, we get that line about the Horned Lord riding the sky.
The west had gone the color of a blood bruise, but the sky above was cobalt blue, deepening to purple, and the stars were coming out. Jon sat between two merlins with only a scarecrow for company and watched the stallion gallop up the sky. Or was it the Horned Lord?
Or was it? We will get into this more in a future Weirwood Compendium episode, but the flying celestial stallion is a nod to Yggdrasil and Sleipnir, Odin's two astral projection horses, which allow him to fly through the cosmos. And giving the stallion constellation the name the Horned Lord, north of the Wall, clues us into the idea of the Horned Lords, the Green Man Old Ones, riding the sky as Green Seers. That makes sense, of course. Only a moment after seeing the Horned Lord in the sky here, the wildling attack begins, and Jon is praying to the Old Ones, and then lighting their Old One's symbolic tree on fire. Next to him, while he does this, is a Scarecrow Night's Watchman. And this, of course, serves as a tremendous clue about the Undead Night's Watch, as we know, emphasizing the link between Zombie Night's Watch, the Horned Lord, and the Old Ones, who are really the old gods of the Weirwood. Honestly, this scene reminds us a bit of Dany looking and seeing the red comet right before she lights Drogo's pyre on fire. Jon sees the Horned Lord in the sky and then lights the Green Man Old One's tree on fire, and Dany looks up, sees the comet in the sky, and lights Drogo's pyre on fire and hatches the dragons. So pretty similar. And of course, both the burning stairway and the burning pyre are what we like to call ground zero bonfires, which symbolize burning weirwoods. This is where the Lightbringer reactions always happen, right? In the middle of these bonfires. So you can find actually elements of both of these scenes, the stairway and Dany's alchemical wedding, at another ground zero bonfire, the burning of the Seven on Dragonstone, which features burning trees like the stairway scene. And then it also, and of course I'm talking about the burning mass of the ships carved into the shapes of the Seven that burn there. And then Stannis is the one that lights the fire that time instead of Jon. Of course, he's an Azor Ahai figure, and it has the birth of a Lightbringer sword to parallel the birth of Dany's dragons. Meanwhile, Drogo's bonfire had burning trees too, and of course, the idea of ascending to the stars was prominently featured, an idea that plays off the theme of the stairway to heaven. So now that we've come to the actual burning of the Switchback Stair, it's time to talk about how the others figure into all this. So think about it. We have this repeated message that the Weirwoods were the originally... We have this repeated message that the Weirwoods were originally the home of the Green Men, who are the Old Ones. And we also see this repeated depiction of Azor Ahai setting the Weirwood home of the Green Men on fire. Now, separately, we've been seeing evidence that Azor Ahai's invasion of the Weirwood Net is what evicted the others from the Weirwood Net. So don't the others kind of have to be the spirits of the old ones who are already inside the tree? This would fit very, very well with George's description of the others as icy she. And really, he means icy ice she, as the word she refers to the mounds, and ice she refers to the people of the mounds. Now, the basic concept here, which Quinn already explained in more detail, of course, is that the ice she are something like fairies or elf spirits, and calling the others icy spirit elves kind of makes sense, right? Especially if the others are the spirits of the original green seers, who are Cernunnos-like stagmen. So no wonder the others are pissed. No wonder they seem to emerge from the shadow of the Weirwood. So I'm going to stop right there and ask you guys what you think about that. Anybody can jump in.
I never picked up on the stairs winding up the wall. That's a really nice bit of symbolism that you've pulled out there. And the fact that he keeps repeating it and that connection to thunderbolts and gods makes it really obvious on retrospect.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good stuff. It's a wooden thunderbolt that gets set on fire, so that's an easy symbol. And it connects the bottom of the wall to the top of the wall, which two different places that have interesting symbolism. And then it gets set on fire, and there's more to come. So I'm seeing a message from Quinn here. It's saying struggling with the voice. Quinn, is that so? You want to go ahead and dip out, buddy?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and leave. I'm gonna go see if I can get some medicine. My throat's like really, really killing me right now.
Cool, man. Well, we appreciate you putting in your presence here and wish you the best of health.
Yeah, I'll keep listening though.
Feel better.
Feel better, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming, and feel better. Boop. All right, so there we go. This is we're going to expand on this in a minute, but guys, this is my theory about the others that I was hyping up. They are.
Uh-oh.
Where'd he go?
We lost him for a second. Please hold technical difficulties.
Am I not coming through?
You're back now.
Oh, yeah, You're back. You just glitched out.
Oh, I got eaten by the Weirwoods.
Yeah, you revealed.
They don't want you to reveal this theory.
So, sum it up for us again, real quick.
So we've got. I was just saying, this is it. This is my big theory about the others. They were the spirits of the original Green Seers, who were green men inside the Weirwood Net. And when Azor Ahai invaded the Weirwood Net, he evicted the people that were in there, and they got forced out of the trees and became the others. And that's essentially my theory. And it's too bad that Quinn had to leave, but his theory about the others as the icy elves basically comes back to, he was saying that he thinks there's a separate group of children of the forest that essentially split off from the children that we see and became the others. And that's why the others speak in a language of cracking ice, whereas the children sound like a babbling brook, amongst other things.
I really like that.
So this is just basically a tweak on that idea, that instead of a rival group of children, it was actually some of these green men, which are probably related to the children who essentially became the others. So I was pretty happy when I realized that, and I realized that it was very similar to Quinn's idea, and it fits very well with the idea. It's almost like George was giving it away when he called them icy, she.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's radical, but also not radical.
So these are other trees then. These are the others represented. These are their werewoods.
They could be. Actually, I tend to think that the ones on the Isle of Faces are actually probably. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like this is such a new idea. I haven't had time to think about how all that works. But So Wiz the Smith is asking a good question. How do they become icy? Well, there's another step. So these spirits are evicted from the trees, right? And they might be incorporeal until we get some baby sacrifice, right? Because we need craster babies to make more others. So what I'm seeing is like the other that we see is one part spirit of the dead green seer, but then the magic needed to give it that icy body probably comes from the sacrifice of babies. And so that's why you have Night's King and Night's Queen sacrificing to the others. What they might have been doing is sacrificing to the spirit others before they ever existed on the physical plane. And that by giving them their enchanted children, their sons, that allowed the others to manifest. So I think that is essentially what my current theory is.
That's nice. I like it.
And if you remember all the way back in Green Zombies 3, when I first wrote it, at the very end, I threw out this weird idea about trees body snatching people. And I said that somehow we're going to get this, where you have the spirit of a green seer or the tree itself inside the tree that's looking to escape and get out of the tree. And that it's either going to steal a white body or, make for itself an icy golem body and become the others. This was sort of like a brainwave intuition that I had. And essentially I'm following up on that thought and saying that this is how that happened. So I'm pretty excited about it.
So do you think that the others have their own god that they worship, that they derive some power from, like the dragons and R'hllor?
Well, I think that the original Night King probably exists inside the frozen part of the other's weirwood net, and that would be the great other. So just like Bloodraven is like the head green seer on the might say the living half of the weirwood net, there's probably a head green seer on the frozen side who would be Night King. And I've been saying for a while that I think the book Night King will only exist in the weirwood net and that he will not end up appearing. Well, maybe he'll manifest at the end, but he's not just walking around outside all the time like on the show. So,
yeah. Well, the one other thought I've had about that, because I tend to agree with you that we won't see the Night's King, but the one other thought is that like resurrected Jon Snow could be some sort of Night's King, given his Stark lineage and the sort of symbolism of the love story with a wildling. I don't know if I believe it necessarily, but that would be the only way I would go with that.
So say that again exactly.
That
rephrase it.
You could see Jon Snow being some sort of Night's King, resurrected, given that he has the Stark lineage as well, much like the original Night's King. He made love with somebody from beyond the wall. He definitely, he's died and then he's going to come back. I don't know. I could see that. I could give that credence. Not that I necessarily believe, like you, that we're going to see the Night's King in this story. But if there was one, that would be my guess.
That's really interesting.
I've wondered if maybe John's body might get temporarily possessed by the others, or I guess by Night's King before they sort of steal it back, if you will. So you could see John rise as, with blue eyes for a time, and then, John's spirit is in ghost, so his body's vacant maybe, and then they got to steal it back. That is like a wild speculation I had one time. So that sort of fits with what you're talking about.
I like that.
And rape. Yep.
What do you think about, like, how would that relate to Dany and the Nissa myth in the story?
Well, we're still trying to figure out what the connection is between Nissa and Night's Queen. It's also possible that the quote-unquote great other, powerful presence inside the weirwood net is actually, Night's Queen. True. Or, remnant of Nissa. Although Nissa to me is on the living half of the weirwood net, not the she is the living half of the weirwood net, not the cold half. And that's the whole point of there being a difference. Because Nissa raises the green zombies to fight the others. So, but it might be Night's Queen, might be Night's King, it might be just a composite other presence that won't ever get, described that specifically as having a gender or whatever. So, lots of possibilities here. I see Joe Magician is excited. Yeah. Horrors of the Crypts, night's stream that we did. And both, I know History of Westeros and myself and Joe Magician, several people have done videos about the crypts and
I love those.
some of the dark possibilities involved there. So you can see how some of that dovetails with what we're talking about.
I guess I was thinking of what Silas had just mentioned about geez, it's gone. Never mind. Continue. Sorry, I
worries.
really had a thought there, but I'll catch it on the rewatch.
It'll come back to you.
Well, yeah, the other thing too is like you and I were talking about this, LML, about the the Norse idea of the soul that can leave the body and then goes to Valhalla. But if it doesn't want to leave, it might resurrect its body and create the Norse zombies, the Draugrs, or it might go into a tree. So that concept could definitely tie into this as well. Like, if John is dead, but his hunger or his soul is in Ghost, and he's laying there becoming colder and more wolf-like. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what that transition does to him and what his motivation would be. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just that's it. Yeah.
So that also makes me think of the show where they talked about Benjen being sort of like in the process of being turned, to the other's magic, and then they saved him with the dragon glass. And even if the mechanism isn't in the book, it does make you think about the idea of, can a white be saved, or can somebody be saved before they're turned? Yeah. We've got the whole stolen other baby idea, which is the idea of taking a child destined to become an other and not having them become another. So there's definitely, that's why I was excited about this episode. I think this is going to provide grounds for new, more speculation and theory making. It's just another cool, fun thing to tinker with. So, all right, picking back up with the script. So here is John Ahai, Azor Snow, praying to the Old Ones and then setting the symbolic Old Ones tree on fire. Are any of the people caught on the burning stair representative of the Old Ones who turn into the others? Well, so glad you asked. So glad you asked. All of the wildlings can be used to symbolize the others. They do it in John's Azor Ahai dream, and again, all throughout the chapter where John lets them through the wall. More specifically, though, the leader of the men trapped on the burning stair is Styr, the earless Magnar of Then, who has otherish symbolism. First of all, he carries a weirwood spear, somewhat reminiscent of the High Septon's weirwood staff, crowned by a crystal orb. And of course, crystal often serves as a symbolic analog for ice. Last time we saw there was even an old one, High Septon, who died in his sleep. And because the High Septon is viewed as the avatar of the gods on Earth, this seemed to be Martin telling us about the Old Ones, as being the old gods of the weirwood, the green seers who die in their sleep and enter the weirwood net. Thus, it's interesting to see the Magnar with the weirwood spear, because Magnar means Lord in the old tongue, and better still, John observes that his people thought him more God than Lord. In other words, Styr is a weirwood god-man of the oldest first man tradition. At one point, Styr utters the extremely Odin-like line. At one point, Styr utters the extremely Odin-like line, "The boy might see better. The boy might see more clear with one eye instead of two," while threatening John at knife point to try to get him to tell the truth. Later at Queen's Crown, Styr commands John to kill the old man beneath the apple tree, which is an obvious parallel to a weirwood sacrifice. So more weirwood godman, weirwood priest action. Then consider also that a steer, S-T-E-E-R, is a name for a neutered male cow, a neutered bull, which kind of makes Styr a horned lord. But a neutered horned lord, of course, implies a green man who has lost his green. As for Styr's other symbolism, well, the neutering implication of Styr for a start, because others are implied as infertile, being a brotherhood of white shadows who need Craster babies or Night's King babies to make more others. If they are the evicted spirits of green men, then they are symbolically green men who've lost their green, as we've been saying. That's consistent with Steer, who is, got the neutered bull symbolism. And of course, Steer has no hair, which is the opposite of hairy, fertile Garth characters. Steer's ears were probably lost to frostbite, implying him as an ice-transformed person. That's probably the strongest symbolism. And he stares at John coldly when they first meet in Mance's tent. Mance's tent itself is a frozen horned lord symbol being made of polar bear skins and adorned with a rack of antlers from a great elk, like the one that Cold Hands rides. Interestingly, Steer actually does not burn on the stair, but instead falls and is buried in snow.
Many leapt from the steps before they burned and died from the fall. 20-odd Thens were still huddled together between the fires when the ice cracked from the heat, and the whole lower third of the stair broke off, along with several tons of ice. That was the last that Jon Snow saw of Steer, the Magnar of Then.
Both the burning stair is the weirwood tree, and Steer and his men, the old ones in the tree, then leaping or falling from the stair and being buried in snow and ice, is a wonderful metaphor for the old ones being driven from the weirwood net when it's set on fire by Azor Ahai to become the others. The fire literally drove them from the stairway, which is like a tree, and into the ice. One thinks about the bodies of the failed dreamers in Bran's coma dream vision, the ones impaled on spires of ice. I've speculated that those somehow represent green seers who became the others. I've been saying that for like 4 years. And here we are with sort of more insight into how that is true. Green seers did become the others. I didn't know how that was true then, but now we know. The green men, the old gods of the Weirwoods, were evicted, and that's kind of like falling and being impaled on an ice spire. So Bran flew while those other dreamers fell. And Steer's fall into the ice here reminds me of those cold, impaled dreamers. Thinking about the idea of the green men, old ones, being kicked out of the Weirwood and somehow locked in magical icy bodies, look again upon the words of Cold Hands.
The wall is more than just ice and stone, he said. There are spells woven into it, old ones and strong.
This line may itself be a clue about old ones being trapped into the ice, woven into the ice, so to speak, locked in their icy bodies, the icy bodies of the others. Heck, the wall does have a talking weirwood face beneath its ice at the Night Fort, a face which looks like that of a 1,000-year-old man. Perhaps that's showing us what is underneath those glimmering icy bodies of the others, a very old weirwood god. That face glows like milk in moonlight, while the bones of the others are as pale as milk glass, for what it's worth. Oh, and you know how we keep seeing people with one leg in all these scenes? Thinking all the way back to 2 weeks ago's episode, we had old one leg at the well in Meereen, the one-eyed Sir Bartimus at the Wolf's Den, who's also missing a leg. We had Septon Maribald, who speaks of having more blisters than toes when he first went shoeless, and of his soles bleeding like pigs. Well, Jon is limping around on a crutch in all these scenes after having taken that arrow wound in the leg while fleeing the wildlings. So it's yet another one-legged man. And I have to assume this is a reference to Bran and the idea of crippled green seers, especially since crippled Bran is present in the scene where Sam relays Cold Hands' words of the spells set into the wall being old ones. The crippled symbolism is also a manifestation of the general concept of losing physical sight and abilities to gain spiritual mobility and sight. Jon is also fresh off of his wounding in one eye by Orell's eagle in this scene. So just like Bartimus at the Wolf's Den, Jon has an Odin eye wound and some sort of one-legged status as he speaks of the old gods and the old ones. That's a pretty good correlation. And don't forget that it was King Jon Stark who built the Wolf's Den. Before we change sections, I've got to confess that there's actually one more Old Ones quote that links to this in sort of a tangential way. Now, when Bowen Marsh receives word of Mormont's ranging suffering defeat at the Fist of the First Men and realizes that the wildling attack on the wall is imminent, he sends a letter to each of the 5 kings pleading for help. That is the letter that Davos famously finds when he's practicing his reading, and which he takes to Stannis, leading to Stannis' decision to come to the wall. Here's the paragraph where Davos reads the letter.
Give me another letter, if you would. As you wish, my lord. Maester Pylos rummaged about his table, unrolling and then discarding various scraps of parchment. There are no new letters. Perhaps an old one? This might serve our purpose. Pylos passed him a letter. Davos flattened down the little square of crinkled parchment and squinted at the tiny crabbed letters. Reading was hard on the eyes. That much he had learned early. Sometimes he wondered if the Citadel offered a champion's purse to the maester who wrote in the smallest hand. Pylos had laughed at the notion, but to the 5 kings, read Davos, hesitating briefly over 5, which he did not often see written out. The king beware? Beyond, the maester corrected.
Actually, I think he had it right. All kings beware. But yeah, so the letter is an old one. Now, if any of these old ones' usages are just a coincidence, this may be the one. But it still kind of fits. The message by Raven from the Lord Commander of the Watch, or in this case, his surrogate, the traitorous Bowen Marsh, the old pomegranate. Well, that's interesting because, you know, the role of Lord Commander is one of, you know, a green seer. That's why he's always got the Raven, and why Jon, the Skin Changer, becomes Lord Commander. Blood Raven was Lord Commander. Last Hero was the first Lord Commander, and he was a Skin Changer or a green seer, etc., etc. So the letters that come from this person is like the words of the old ones. That's how I interpret it. Now, this message has the effect of summoning Stannis, a Stagman Azor high figure, to come to the wall to prepare to face the others, which he and Melisandre regard as the true enemy, and which we now know are really the old ones. So there you go. That's that section. There's one more section. But it looks like Sanri's had thoughts. Sanri, so you were talking about, you remembered what you were saying, and you were wondering about Jon having Night's King parallels. What does that mean for Dany's fate if she's Nissa Nissa? Well, so another version of Jon as Night's King, we were talking about maybe his body will be temporarily possessed by the others and then freed. You know, Joe Magician and I talked about the prologue as sort of a foreshadowing where the others are trying to make Waymar a new Night's King. They're essentially ice transforming him, and they're giving him the one blue eye symbol, which makes him like a Euron figure, which is a Night's King thing. And so we talked about, well, maybe what they want from Jon is, you know, he's the prince that was promised to the others, and that they want him for a sunbeam, you know, a cold sunbeam, and that they want to make him a Night's King, and that maybe Jon Snow has to go along with that as some sort of self-sacrifice in order to like fulfill the pact and make the others happy or something like that. That is a distinct possibility, and it's also one of the things that we saw suggested when we backwards read the prologue, if you recall.
Yeah. And it makes me think of now, I think we were talking about recently, I don't remember where, but we were talking about Jon's like destiny in the show and how it's possible that he could be like the next Cold Hands and have to range beyond the wall forever. I think like that fits really well with the whole theme we have.
Yeah, I kind of prefer the Cold Hands plot line as opposed to him becoming a new Night's King. It's not totally different. It's similar in some symbolic ways, but I like the fact that all of these fun possibilities seem to be in play. So there's a good story in there to be written for sure, I would think. And you were also mentioning, so what does it mean for Dany? Well, perhaps she becomes, maybe Jon and Dany are together forever, but like as, you know, a new Night's Queen and King, or maybe they're undead, you know, so it's like happily ever after, but not quite.
Oh man, that would be so bittersweet.
It could be. Or maybe the reason they can't be together is because Jon has to go become the new Cold Hands, and so he can't be with Dany.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
seem kind of ignoble though for him to just be a wandering servant.
Kind of what?
You know,
what do you mean?
ignoble, not living up to his the stature he has in the story.
Well, I mean, he's kind of like, if you think about his character, he is such like a self-sacrificing person. Like,
Yeah, it's kind of like Jesus taking on the sins of the world. So John is paying the penance of mankind by being the new cold hands, essentially.
it's like, even though he has like a regency and you could say like rule and authority in the story right now, he's kind of like, it's not really like, I guess I'm thinking more of the TV show and where the TV show's at right now. So I'm thinking of that level of John's thinking. So even though he does have some kind of regency and some kind of claim and whatnot, he is not, in my opinion, the kind of person who would just be like, okay, this is fine. Like, I'm gonna just like put myself first and put my claim to the throne first, is what I'm getting at. Sorry.
Yeah, and both John and Danny could basically have that in common, where giving up their claims on the throne is what makes them heroes, and makes them similar. So I could see something like that happening for sure.
Sure,
definitely see that happening for the.
And I definitely think that he's going beyond the wall after his resurrection in the books. Like that's something that could very well happen. Like he just decides to, instead of going south, he goes north for a while. And maybe he can stand the cold better as a dead person, somehow.
And so, getting back to the idea of the others as the green men, there's a couple of interesting ramifications here. So here is the nuance to the others. We're wondering, like, why are they mad? Was there some great wrong committed to them? Well, this would be the answer. They were driven out of, they were good, happy Cernunnos elves, and they got driven out of their trees and they're pissed. But maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe the green men are naughty, and that's why they became the others. Like maybe those green men, maybe Azor Ahai's group of people were green men who essentially turned against the other green men. And so you have this rival kind of thing. Because remember, Stannis is also a stag man, even though he kills Renly. And Stannis is the fiery Azor Ahai guy, and Renly is the green Garth guy. Stannis is also a stag man. And I will give you a sneak preview of another Old Ones quote that I didn't include in this essay, but it fits here, and it's tantalizing. So check this out. Others we find ripening under trees with ropes about their necks. We came on some the day before last, said Jaime. Adam Marbrand's scouts had found them, hanging black-faced beneath a crabapple tree. The corpses had been stripped naked, and each man had a crabapple shoved between his teeth. None bore any wounds. Plainly they had yielded. Strongboar had grown furious at that, vowing bloody vengeance on the heads of any man who would truss up warriors to die like suckling pigs. It might have been outlaws, Sir Davin said, when Jaime told the tale. Or not. There are still bands of Northmen about, and these lords of the Trident may have bent their knees, but methinks their hearts are still wolfish. Jaime glanced at his two younger squires, who were hovering near the braziers, pretending not to listen. Lewis Piper and Garrett Page were both the sons of river lords. He had grown fond of both of them and would hate to have to give them to Sir Ilyn. The ropes suggest Dondarrion to me. Your lightning lord's not the only man who knows how to tie a noose. Don't get me started on Lord Beric. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere, but when you send men after him, he melts away like dew. The river lords are helping him, never doubt it. A bloody martyr lord, if you can believe that. One day you hear the man is dead, and the next they're saying how he can't be killed. Sir Davin put his wine cup down. My scouts report fires in the high places at night. Signal fires, they think, as if there were a ring of watchers all around us. And there are fires in the villages as well, some new god. No, an old one. Thoros is with Dondarrion, the fat Mirish priest who used to drink with Robert. His golden hand was on the table. Jaime touched it and watched the gold glimmer in the sullen light of the braziers. We'll deal with Dondarrion if we have to, but the Blackfish must come first. So, R'hllor is an old one. Discuss.
I've often wondered if, there's a connection to the fire god in Lovecraft, which is called. I'll have to think about it for a second. Can't remember right now. But anyway, it's like a flaming ball of fire.
That makes perfect sense.
Great balls of fire. Sorry.
Makes sense. Melisandre would worship that, huh?
So it could be, two thoughts occur to me here. It could be that Martin's using old ones now in the more vague sense of like the old gods. So R'hllor and the Green Men and all the old forces are the old ones.
Okay.
That's more like how Lovecraft uses the term. But it could be, I could think of ways that R'hllor is more literally connected to the Green Men. And it's just what we were saying. If Azor Ahai is a Green Men who essentially, chased after fire magic, then maybe that's R'hllor. Maybe his spirit only exists in like the fiery ether realm, and so he is an old one who essentially, just as the old ones became the others and became frozen in the ice, Azor Ahai is an old one who became R'hllor. What do you think, Silas?
Well, there's an interesting story here. I'll deviate slightly, but it relates back to that. So basically, the god I was referring to is Cthugha, who was invented by Durlath to be his like fire elemental. And then George's first editor, one of his first editors, I should say, and one of his good friends, Lynn Carter, who wrote a lot of the Conan stories in the 60s, he invented a god that's the offspring of Cthugha called Efum-Zaha. Now, Efum-Zaha is the cold flame, If Cthugha is the fireball, Efum-Zaha is an icy flame that there's only a few stories about, but in essence, one of them is that it lands on Earth in the North Pole and it lives underneath a mountain, and like it was released once and it froze
Stop!
Yeah.
Stop! Sorry, go ahead.
Right? Pretty good stuff, huh?
So there's a cold flame whose name sounds like Azor Ahai. It lands at the North Pole and then sleeps under the ice. Are you fucking serious?
Right, and invented by his one of his best buddies. So George definitely knows about this story. It's pretty amazing stuff. And he has these servants called the Spectral Yidlim, right, or something. So might be the others there too.
So anyway, when you said spectral, you got glitched out. So say that again.
Spectral Yidlim, they're called, I believe. If you look up Efum-Zaha, and let me spell that out in the chat. And check that out. It's pretty fun stuff. So like the relationship between the fire god, the ice god, that they're both there, and then this story is a Song of Ice and Fire. That when I heard that, I was like, oh my god, it blew my mind. So
the idea of a cold flame. I mean, that's what the others are all about. Is the cold burning flame. I've talked about Azor Ahai becoming Night's King.
Yeah.
So it's basically Azor Ahai's seed is the power that fuels the others in some sense. So just as the fire burns and drives them out of the weirwood net, there's also an element of, if Azor Ahai is Night's King, Night's Queen is taking the fiery seed of Night's King and using that to create the physical bodies of the others, so that they are that frozen flame. So this is fun, guys. When my personal tinfoil or theory making ends up with a storyline that is almost exactly like something that's an obvious influence of George Martin, like that's how you know when you're on the right track. So this lends credence to the idea that there could be a black meteor or a white dawn meteor, for all we know, somewhere in the heart of winter, and that this is something that is powering the others, or that they're drawing power from, or something. Wow.
Yeah, and these beings come from outer space and like land on the Earth. Like the great old ones. They're not necessarily gods. They're just like alien beings that are greater than us. So what's that?
That R'hllor is an alien.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And Storm's End, it's a spaceship. Yeah, no, we've already covered all this.
Perfect.
So here's another one, guys. I'm freelancing a little bit here, but since we're talking about this is a real quick one. This is from the Mystery Night. Do you want a clout in the ear? There are no dragons. No, but there are eggs. The last dragon left a clutch of 5, and they have more on Dragonstone. Old ones from before the dance. Dun, dun, dun. So, goes on. My brothers all have them too. Arion's looks as though it's made of gold and silver with veins of fire running through it. Mine is white and green, all swirly. So, pretty cool. The old one's dragon eggs.
White and green makes sense. The eye color.
White and green, right? There's your green dragon stuff. So,
Yee.
very cool. All right. Well, there's just one more section here, and I think it's a pretty short section. Let me get to. It's a decent sized section. Probably take half an hour to get through. Guys, are you down? Another half an hour?
I think we got this.
Okay, cool. Let me hit the restroom real quick. Sanri, why don't you give us a tour of your delightful Isle of Faces swamp that you have going on there?
Yes. Here we go.
I'll be right back.
Silas, if you want to shout out any changes you want while we're looking at this, just feel free. I've got some very spoopy weirwood trees and some green men. The obelisk, and I put a bunch of runes on there for y'all, so it looked less phallic, so everybody could feel comfortable. Yeah, and some elks, spooky elks.
Can you talk louder? They can't hear you apparently.
I can't believe they can't hear me. I'm sorry. Let me move my mic. Hang on. It was working earlier, I swear. How is it now? Better?
Very good.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, lots of spooky elks is what I was saying, and spooky trees. And also an obelisk, and I made it totally runic, and I tried to make it less phallic, guys, but I mean it's a peen. We gotta be honest here. Love it. So Silas, who's your favorite eldritch apocalyptic old god man friend dude person?
My favorite one of them is probably Narlethotep. I mean,
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
He's like the funniest and the most ubiquitous too, and just kind of the most interesting and devious. The other one too that relates to this pretty well is Nodens. Nodens is like a hunter who hunts Narlethotep, and so there's some symbolism there that I haven't fully formulated, but I think it's kind of incorporated into maybe Sam being from the family of Harlan the hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. So Nodens is fun and worth looking up, and Celtic god. We were talking about it a little earlier in the chat, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I'm gonna say I'm not nearly as educated with you guys, that I'm not nearly as educated in Lovecraftian deities and myths as I am some other things. So I like Cthulhu just because I like to draw him.
Yeah, right.
Because, he's my precious little creepy boy son or something. Well,
why vote for a lesser evil?
Yeah, and also I'm a big South Park fan, so the Cthulhu episode is one of my faves.
So I leave for 5 minutes. I'm right back to South Park Cthulhu. I see.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
it's
such a failure.
No, I should stop teasing you. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
I'm just it says that East Coast humor. It's ball busting all the time.
Jeff's rubbing off on you.
But no, I'm listening. I'm gonna. I want to get Silas. I want to give you a chance to expound a little more. I heard you start getting going on some of this. I've given you a lot to react to, so give me a couple more minutes here on anything that we've brought up here. I've been doing a lot of the talking, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I like where you're going with this idea of expelled souls, because I've been thinking a lot about like the North mythology that he's utilizing to show how bodies or souls will leave bodies on death or even during sleep and take the form of animals or join into a werewood net. So if that did exist in the past on some level, then first off, I'm interested in like who those souls were, but also what would have caused them to leave the trees. So I like what you're proposing here, that there may be some way that they were pushed out by fire. Other than that, yeah, I like how that ties it in.
I was just snacking on some Cheez-Its and I didn't want everyone to watch me chewing, but I was listening the whole time. Yep, driven out by fire. And that makes sense because, you know, they don't like fire. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then if there's like you know, like my only question is like, how does Azor Ahai make it over to Westeros, and like why, you know, and what does it have to do with, say, Battle Isle of Old Town, you know?
Well, so the logical answer is that the Great Empire of the Dawn is this expanding civilization, and at some point they make contact with Westeros, and so they would set Battle Isle is a Phoenician-like fortress city built just off the coast as a trading post, a fortified trading post, so they can exchange goods with the people of Westeros. Potentially, at some point, they come across the Children of the Forest or the Green Men, and you know they see a different version of, you know, a new version of magic or something that they've not seen before. And so, basically, when Azor Ahai or the Bloodstone Emperor took power, there was already this connection established between, you know, because I don't think Azor Ahai just like built the fortress. You know what I mean? It would have already been there. Yeah. And so when he took power, he already knew about Westeros. So he's got a choice. He can either sail to Westeros or ride his dragon to Westeros. I mean, he can go either way, but you know, you need the ships to sail the people. So what I would picture is essentially once Azor Ahai takes power in the east, he then essentially invades Westeros. And that's the battle at Battle Isle, is him invading. You know, where would you invade? You would use the beachhead that your civilization already established and invade from there. So that's how that works. And then at some point he's got to get to the God's Eye to, you know, do his dark magic ceremony, which is probably what makes sense. And something I was going to say earlier is that based on what we've seen in the show, a lot of people think the other's final end game might be the God's Eye. Like, where are they trying to get to? It's either Winterfell, but, you know, it seems like they're going to get past Winterfell. So it's like, well, if they get past Winterfell, where are they going? The next place to look is the God's Eye. So maybe that's the big, like the Holy Grail, because, you know, there's a big fucking black penis statue there has great power. And anyone that lays both hands on its girth can summon, you know, the giants in the girth, and they can wake the giants. The thing starts to wiggle a little bit. They wake the girth, and I'll stop. Totally inappropriate. I'm just trying to make sure everyone's still awake. All right. So now that
we've been making good time today.
All right. Have we? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So there we go. Now that I've wiggled the girth, somebody give me a GIF. Make me a GIF. Please, sir, can I be a GIF? Let me queue up some Patreon names. And by the way, if you've signed up for Patreon in the last like 2 months, I am a terrible slacker and have not processed your name and added your nickname in yet. That's something I want to catch up on in the next 2 weeks, hopefully. So I apologize. Hopefully you're giving me money because you like my essays and not because you expect really prompt service there. So, but I will get you. I'll get you soon. I usually update them in chunks, like about once a month or so, and I just sort of update the whole thing. But in any case, I have had some nice new patrons sign up in the last month, so I thank you all. I see all your messages, and I'll be responding to them shortly. And let's thank some folks. We did the earthly avatars, so let's go on to some Sacred Order of the Black Hand. Oh, we're going to use my spookiest cut here for this one. Everyone ready? Move this out of the way. Sorry. Crow cages. This section is brought to you by the Sacred Order of the Black Hand. Sir Stoyles of the Long Branch, Seeker of Pale Blood. Count Magpie the Rude, the Dinky Giant, Hornblower of the Oslo Fjord. The Lady of Stellar Reason and Maleficence. Lord Brandon Brewer of Castle Blackroom, sworn alesmith to House Stark, Grand Master of the Zithomancers Guild, Keeper of the Buzz, Poseidon of the Dragonglass Sea, the Orcish Priest, Ridiculous Ed Tolle, the Firebeard of the Dragonglass Forge, whose eyes are like pale morning mist, Westeros of the Cosmic Mill, the Unchained Uncle, host of bards, and Thomas Pappas, who needs a nickname still, but is my good friend. Those are the spirits of the old ones. That's them, like screaming as they're sent out of the trees and into the cold night. That's what they sound like.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sandrix.
Could go straight to sleep to that.
Totes for show. It's his auto-tune. Yeah, I don't think auto-tune's going to help that one, buddy. All right, so crow cages. We're going to talk about, we've been talking about the others, but of course, as I opened the essay with, the others and the Night's Watch both come from the Weirwoods. That's their common point of origin from which they deviate. So we're going to talk about the Night's Watch in this one. And this is going to be Arya and her chapter at Stony Sept. So in A Storm of Swords, Arya is a hostage of the Brotherhood without banners. Their golden squirrel, as the outlaw Greenbeard says. They've taken her to Stony Sept at the start of the scene, and the Old One's clue is hiding in the form of the town gates. But the lead-in has some interesting stuff about a guy with an antler hat, so we'll read the whole quote.
Stony Sept was the biggest town Arya had seen since King's Landing, and Harwin said her father had won a famous battle here. The Mad King's men had been hunting Robert, trying to catch him before he could rejoin your father, he told her as they rode towards the gate. He was wounded, being tended to by some friends, when Lord Connington the Hand took the town with a mighty force and started searching house by house. Before they could find him, though, Lord Eddard and your grandfather came down on the town and stormed the walls. Lord Connington fought back fierce. They battled in the streets and alleys, even on the rooftops, and all the Septons rang their bells so the small folk would know to lock their doors. Robert came out of hiding to join the fight when the bells began to ring. He slew 6 men that day, they say. One was Miles Mooton, a famous knight who'd been Prince Rhaegar's squire. He would have slain the Hand, too, but the battle never brought them together. Connington wounded your grandfather Tully sore, though, and killed Sir Dennis Arryn, the darling of the Vale, but when he saw the day was lost, he flew off as fast as the griffins on his shield. The Battle of the Bells, they called it after. Robert always said your father won it, not him. More recent battles had been fought here as well, Arya thought from the look of the place. The town gates were made of raw new wood. Outside the walls, a pile of charred planks remained to tell what happened to the old ones.
Dun, dun, dun. So you can see how this one kind of pairs with the quote about the two halves of the Switchback Stair being rebuilt together, the old one and the new one. Here, instead of a wooden stair, we have wooden gates. And again, we have the old ones which have been burned, just as the burnt half of the stair was labeled the old one at the wall. Are these burned gates supposed to be symbolizing a burning weirwood too? Well, the answer is yes, since weirwood doors are kind of a thing. There's the Black Gate at the Night Fort that we just talked about, the Weirwood and Ebony Moonface doors to the House of Black and White, and the Weirwood Moon door at the Eyrie, which enables one to fly. Get it? Flying through the weirwood door. Symbolically, the weirwoods function as the doors of perception, if you will. Break on through to more or less. So they're like the doorway to godlike knowledge and astral projection and all that business. The weirwoods also represent the doors of death, the entrance to the netherworld, or you might call it the astral plane. So yeah, burned old one's doors work pretty well as a weirwood symbol. I'll also add that a pile of charred planks sounds a bit like a funeral pyre. A lot like a funeral pyre, actually. The other notable thing is the story of the Battle of the Bells that precedes the line about the old ones. It's King Robert again. We seem to be seeing a lot of Robert today, don't we? It's no coincidence. He's a Baratheon and a Storm Lord He's a Baratheon and a Storm Lord turned Storm King, and he loves antlered hats. And he was swinging that hammer all over the place here. It's not the only thing he was swinging around here. I'll get to that in a minute. Although he didn't burn those old one gates, that's sort of the symbolic implication. It's easier to see when you compare this quote to another old one's quote involving a place that Robert definitely did destroy and burn.
Theon moved to the bow for a better view. He saw the castle first, the stronghold of the Botleys, a lesser house sworn to his father. When he was a boy, it had been timber and wattle, but Robert Baratheon had razed that structure to the ground. Lord Sawain had built it in stone, for now a small square keep crowned the hill. Pale green flags drooped from the squat corner towers, the Botley banner, he knew, emblazoned with a shawl of silvery fish. Beneath the dubious protection of the fish-ridden little castle lay the village of Lordsport, its harbor a swarm with ships. When he'd last seen Lordsport, it had been a smoking wasteland, the skeletons of burning galleys lying black on the stony shore like the bones of dead leviathans. The houses no more than broken walls and cold ash. After 10 years, few traces of the war remained. The small folk had built new hovels with the stones of the old and cut fresh sod for their roofs. A new inn had risen beside the land, twice the size of the old one, with a lower story of cut stone and 2 upper stories of timber. The sept beyond had never been rebuilt, though. Only a 7-sided foundation remained to show where it had stood. Robert Baratheon's fury had soured the Ironman's taste for the new gods, it would seem. Theon was more interested in ships than gods.
Many of you will remember this quote from the Grey King and the Sea Dragon episode, because this quote is a great one for showing that the sea dragon myth... I'm sorry, let me just do that again. Many of you will remember this quote from the Grey King and the Sea Dragon episode, because this quote is a great one for showing that the sea dragon myth refers in part to ships, as we see shipwrecks at Lordsport described as the bones of leviathans. Today we're keying in on the old one usage, and the fact that all the damage Theon remembers being done here was done by Robert Baratheon and his mighty warhammer, which is of course a nod to Thor's Mjolnir, but more importantly, it's symbolic of a moon meteor hammer. The Switchback Stair, the old one, was like a wooden thunderbolt and it caught on fire. And here at Lordsport, a storm lord with a thunder hammer burned and smashed everything, including that inn, the old one. That's why I look at the previous quote about Stony Sept, where we get a story about Robert Baratheon smashing things right before we're shown the burned and blackened old one's gates, and see an implied connection. The thunderbolt that we keep seeing is the storm god's thunderbolt, the one that creates the burning tree, the one that conveys the fire of the gods to man. And so what we see in all these scenes is that the old ones are tied to that burning tree. And they may have been like literally tied to the burning tree and then killed, but yeah, double, so wordplay. So we know how this, we know how the old ones are tied to the weirwoods. It's that Hammer of the Waters legend and the moon meteors. The green seers on the Isle of Faces were said to call down the Hammer of the Waters, which was a moon meteor, we think. But here it's Robert dropping the hammer, and with him comes Thoros and his flaming sword too, the first one through the breach. In other words, I think this is another clue that the green seers who called down the moon meteors, the flaming swords, were these horned lords, the green men, the old ones. Or as I mentioned earlier, it may be that their magic was used or stolen, or one green man turned against the rest. Or maybe it was Nissa Nissa, a female of the Old One's race, instead of a child of the forest whose Old One's magic was stolen by Azor Ahai. Still, we've seen so many Stagman Azor Ahai figures to know that it's possible Azor Ahai himself may be a naughty green man. And of course, we were just talking about that a bit earlier. 1 second. So while we're talking about ships, burning pyres, and the Old Ones, let me cut in a sort of random Old Ones quote from Davos's Battle of the Blackwater chapter, because it actually does fit here. As we know from studying the sea dragon metaphor, burning boats often function as symbols of the Weirwoods, the tree that burns with the fire of the gods. The cool part of the sea dragon metaphor is that the Weirwood is like a ship that the Green Seer can use to sail the cosmos, if you will. You guys remember all that stuff. So, Weirwoods are like boats because they sail the universe. They're like doors because they allow you to enter different realms. They're like stairways because they allow man to reach into the heavens. They're like bridges because they span the river of time. They're like coffins and tombs because dead people live in them. They're like a rising mushroom cloud of ash because Yggdrasil is a great ash tree. Because the roots of the Weirwoods connect like a fungal network. And because they called down the moon meteors that made the mushroom clouds. Everyone got all that? Good. There'll be a quiz later. Versatile things, those Weirwoods. There's more to come. Anyway, at the Battle of the Blackwater, we got some of the best burning ship symbolism anywhere, because they all burnt with that treacherous green fire known as wildfire.
Between the flashing oars of Scepter and Faithful, Davos saw a thin line of galleys drawn across the river, the sun glinting off the gold paint that marked their hulls. He knew those ships as well as he knew his own. When he'd been a smuggler, he'd always felt safer knowing whether the sail on the horizon marked a fast ship or a slow one, and whether her captain was a young man hungry for glory or an old one serving out his days. Ooh, the warhounds called.
That was a good war horn, Silas. Nice baritone horn. That's good. So right after the Old One captain is mentioned, a horn is sounded. The phrase, an old one serving out his days, kind of sounds like it's talking about the Night's Watch, which fits with the horn blowing. And of course, it's the Lannister ships that Davos is looking at, which introduced the wildfire to the battle with all its fiery green seer symbolism. So sure, why not an old one as captain? As you probably remember, the wildfire basically takes Ravenous Reader's green sea metaphor and sets it on fire. So this is really just another way of talking about Azor Ahai setting the Weirwood net on fire. Any old ones captaining these ships will soon find themselves in a sea of green fire captaining a burning ship. At its most basic level, the interpretation here is the basic one that we've already well established. The old ones are green seers who live in the Weirwood and get burned. The burning ships and the towering pillar of green fire that is loosed at the battle is very comparable to the burning staircase or any of the other Ground Zero bonfires. Let's turn away from burning ships as Weirwood metaphors and turn back to the burning doors and return to Arya's chapter at Stony Sept, because it turns out those burned Old Ones gates were just a warm-up. There are more Old Ones coming, that's right, and they seem to be members of the Night's Watch.
In the market square at the town's heart stood a fountain in the shape of a leaping trout, spouting water into a shallow pool. Women were filling pails and flagons there. A few feet away, a dozen iron cages hung from the creaking wooden posts. Crow cages, Arya knew. The crows were mostly outside the cages, splashing in the water or perched atop the bars. Inside were men. Lem reined up, scowling. "What's this now?" "Justice," answered a woman at the fountain. "What, did you run short a hempen rope?" "Was this done at Sir Wilbert's decree?" asked Tom. A man laughed bitterly. "The lions killed Sir Wilbert a year ago. His sons are all off with the young wolf getting fat in the west. You think they give a damn for the likes of us? It was the mad huntsman caught these wolves." "Wolves." Arya went cold. "Rob's men and my father's." She felt drawn toward the cages. The bars allowed so little room that the prisoners could neither sit nor turn. They stood naked, exposed to sun and rain and wind. The first 3 cages held dead men. carrion crows had eaten out their eyes, yet the empty sockets seemed to follow her.
So to begin with, this is obvious last hero math. We've got 12 crow cages that contain wolves who fought in the army of the Starks. Arya is the 13th. She's the night wolf and the wolf girl. A cool bit of foreshadowing here. She's going to get a head start on her faceless man training by offering these prisoners water right before her companions give them a clean death. Then later in the House of Black and White, she serves somebody who wishes to die the apparently poisoned water of the dark pool, which kind of merges those two ideas. In any case, Arya is the 13th wolf here, and the fact that these wolves are in crow cages really locks them down as symbolic Night's Watch brothers. Not only are they crows, of course, they're also prisoners, just as the members of the Watch are never allowed to abandon their service at the Wall and frequently arrive at the Wall as a result of being convicted of a crime. The first 3 cages have dead bodies, and the crows have given them a bit of weirwood stigmata by eating out their eyes. One also recalls the story of the bad little boy who was struck by lightning and had his eyes eaten, and who had his eyes eaten out by crows, a story told to Bran, which is symbolic of the Odin-like Green Seer awakening. These dead crows are ready to be raised from the dead. All of these prisoners were caught by the Mad Huntsman, who's a green man figure in his own right. This suggests a possible scenario for the green zombie ritual. Perhaps the green men capture and execute the last hero's companions, only to raise them as the green zombie watch. That's one scenario that I think is in play. But we might also see the Mad Huntsman, emphasis on mad, as evil Azor Ahai, the rebellious green man, killing other green men who later become green zombies. There's really a lot of very related, sort of similar possibilities here. So we'll try to suss those out as we continue to explore these ideas and more Old Ones quotes in the future, because no, we're not going to get to all the Old Ones quotes today. Never you fear. There's actually a bunch more still. Anyways, so picking back up with the scene.
The 4th man in the row stirred as she passed. Around his mouth, his ragged beard was thick with blood and flies. They exploded when he spoke, buzzing around her head. Water. The word was a croak. Please, water.
Flies exploded when he spoke. Yeah, those are moon meteors. Carry on.
The man in the next cage opened his eyes at the sound. Hear, he said. Hear me. An old man he was. His beard was gray and his scalp was bald and mottled brown with age. There was another dead man beyond the old one, a big red-bearded man with a rotting gray bandage covering his left ear and part of his temple. But the worst thing was between his legs, where nothing remained but a crusted brown hole crawling with maggots.
So sorry to keep that last line in. Sorry to make you read that, Silas. But the castration is an important part of the Horned Lord mythology, as Crowfood's daughter plans to explain in an upcoming video. Sneak peek on her Disputed Lands channel. I know that's going to be a good one. And the Night's Watch brothers and the others both have this symbolic castration in common, because they are both brotherhoods of men who have their fertility taken away in the sense that they are forbidden to sire children, or the others may not be able to sire children. And as we've seen, both the others and the brothers are symbolic of green men in winter who have basically lost their green, and have lost their fertility. So now, here in this crow cage, we find one of the old ones, a member of this little symbolic Night's Watch green zombie crew. That's great. It's very like finding the wrong-smelling jailer, Garth, among the dozen people at the Wolf's Den at White Harbor. Garth was the old one, if you recall. Ergo, we may have had some of the green men themselves in the last hero's company. And if you notice, the old one in the crow cage has skin which is mottled brown with age. That's a very sneaky way of giving him dappled brown skin, because mottled and dappled are pretty much the same. And of course, dappled brown skin is the skin of the children of the forest, whose skin imitates that of a deer. The Lengi have medium golden brown skin too, so it may be that the green men actually had skin that looks more like that of the children. I think Sir Nunos would probably look cooler with like dark brown skin anyways, than like actual green skin, so he looks like the Hulk or something, but I don't know. I guess you can fill that in how you want to. Returning to the quote, Arya sees a fat man cruelly crammed into the cage. She speaks to him, asking whose men they were.
At the sound of her voice, the fat man opened his eyes. The skin around them was so red, they looked like boiled eggs floating in a dish of blood. Water. A drink.
Just jumping in here to say, moon meteors, eggs floating in blood, which are also eyes. Yeah, those are cooking moon egg symbols, I would say.
A swallow, the fat one called down. Have mercy, boy, a swallow. The old one slid an arm up to grasp the bars. The motion made his cage swing violently. Water, gasped the one with the flags in his beard. She looked at their filthy hair and scraggly beards and reddened eyes, at their dry, cracked, bleeding lips. Wolves, she thought again. Like me. Was this her pack? How could they be Rob's men? She wanted to hit them. She wanted to hurt them. She wanted to cry. They all seemed to be looking at her, the living and the dead alike. The old man has squeezed 3 fingers out between the bars. Water, he said. Water.
So Martin actually doubles up on the Old One label for this prisoner here. And that makes 3 Old One's usages in this chapter in total, including the Old One's burned gates. All the wolves in the crow cages have red eyes and bleeding lips, and this weirwood stigmata is exactly what we should expect to see here, as the green zombie, of course, calls for weirwood-assisted resurrection for the last hero's dozen companions. The cages, suspended as they are in space, are also a symbol of the weirwoods as a prison and a trap for green seers, with the suspension simulating the flying of the green seers. In other words, the green seer's body is tightly pinioned like the men in the crow cages, but his spirit flies, and the men in the crow cages are suspended in the air and covered in flies. Is this a joke Martin intended to make? I don't know, but it's funny in a dark sort of way. You will never walk again, Bran, but you will fly. Wait, you will be covered in flies. Sorry. Right? Oops. Anyways, I do think that's what's going on, but Stormy 4400 with the super chat says, my Sundays have been crazed recently and I've not been able to listen live, and I wanted to stop by briefly to say thanks for the hard work. Well, thanks, Stormy. I appreciate those little notes of kindness. I really do. Perks me right up. Now back to the flies. A final note on this chapter. We find another rebuilt inn, just like at Lordsport, where we had an Old One inn. And wouldn't you know it, there's a green man here.
On the east side of the market square stood a modest inn with whitewashed walls and broken windows. Half its roof had burned off recently, but the hole had been patched over. Above the door hung a wooden shingle painted as a peach with a big bite taken out of it. They dismounted at the stables, sitting catty-corner, and Greenbeard bellowed for the grooms. The buxom red-haired innkeep howled with pleasure at the sight of them, then promptly set to tweaking them. Greenbeard, is it? Or Graybeard? Mother, take mercy. When did you get so old?
He's an old green man, get it? And we were just talking about the green to gray cycle, of course, in the chat. You have green boys and gray beards. That's a phrase you see a lot, particularly applied to the Night's Watch. The gray and green, murky soup of maiden pools, defiled pool. Dead flesh is gray and green. Like Stoneheart, I think, is gray and green. So there's a lot of stuff going on with that. And of course, Crowfoot's daughter talks about the Garth Grey King cycle, which is basically just Oak and Holly King, reinterpreted. So here's Greenbeard turning gray. How'd he get so old, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. Old green men. So in any case, inns can also be used to symbolize weirwoods. That's right. Add inns to the list. And we've seen that before with the inn at the Trident, which used to span the river like a weir, which gets renamed the Orphan Inn when it's full of children. And think of weirwoods full of children of the forest. It's painted white like a weirwood. It's called the Gallows Inn when Tywin comes there and hangs a bunch of people, including the innkeep Masha Heddle, who has vivid weirwood stigmata due to the sire leaf she always chews. And of course, hanging people from the tree is Odin stuff. So inns are well established as weirwood symbols. And here, one of the main things is that we often find a Nissa person as the innkeep. That's usually the giveaway. So, for example, Masha Hedel, she's got weirwood stigmata, and she gets hung on the tree. And then the innkeep here at the Peach, which, by the way, isn't really an inn, of course. Well, I mean, kind of is, but she has Nissa symbolism too. She's a redhead, as you can see, and her name is Tansy. But Tansy tea is also called moon tea. So she's a moon-associated redhead. And we know what that means. She likes to sleep with Greenbeard, whom she immediately begins teasing here. Greenbeard himself is turning gray and old, which, again, that's kind of the point. Old ones as green men. You may remember the Peaches of Immortality from Sun Wukong, which we talked about in the Tyrion Targaryen episode. And you may recall from that story or elsewhere that peaches are often given this association with immortality. That fits with the weirwood, of course, which extends the lives of the green seers long beyond their mortal days. So it's an inn called the Peach. An interesting tidbit to note here. Robert Baratheon is almost certainly hid right here at the Peach during the Battle of the Bells. John Connington, recalling the battle, thinks that at the end they had the usurper hidden in a brothel. I'm sorry, this is my John Connington voice. At the end they had the usurper hidden in a brothel. I got to work on it, but anyways. And there's and then here is there's a memory of this at the Peach. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a memory of this at the Peach. I simply have to quote it too. It's really just too good.
They say King Robert fucked my mother while he was here, back before the battle. Not that he didn't have all the other girls too, but Leslian says he liked my ma the best. The girl did have hair like the old king's, Arya thought, a great thick mop of it, as black as coal. That doesn't mean anything, though. Gendry has the same kind of hair. Lots of people have black hair.
It's a good one, right? And of course, a second later, Bella offers to fuck Gendry, which almost happens but doesn't, and that would have been incest, of course. And that would have been horrible. We could have almost had incest in the story, guys. Anyways, that last line is the giveaway. This is indeed one of Robert's bastard children. So think about that. The inn represents the weirwood, and one of the children that we find there is a child of Garth. Greenbeard may have also fathered children here as many times as he's been through. And even the simple idea of Robert or Greenbeard staying here is suggestive of green men living inside the weirwood. Finally, what Arya does at the Peach is noteworthy. First, she prevents and then almost causes Gendry to sleep with his half-sister Bella here, but that's a different story. Arya first gets a bath, where the maid scrubbed Arya's back with a stiff, bristly brush that almost took her skin off. Then she's dressed in the famous acorn dress, which, in her own words, makes her look like a tree, or like she's inside a tree, which the inn represents. Then after she falls asleep later, she enters the wolf dream, leading Nymeria's pack across the riverlands, feasting on the flesh of the horse they killed, and howling at the moon when it comes out. So that again fits the inn as a symbolic weirwood. Arya enters it, dreams, and then skin changes animals, just as Bran does. Her using the power of the weirwood dream to lead the wolf pack is basically a repeat symbolic depiction of Arya as the Stark last hero leading the watch at the crow cages outside. One might even imagine Arya's dream wolf pack as the resurrected wolves from the crow cages. Now we can see why the old burned gates to this town were labeled as the Old Ones. 12 wolves and crow cages, symbolic of the last hero's green zombies, including an old one, and they're being hung and killed right in front of a weirwood symbol, the inn, which is also labeled as being tied to the Old Ones. It's a perfect mock-up of my proposed green zombie ceremony, where the 12 are killed and resurrected before a weirwood tree. That seems to be what's going on here. And the old ones are everywhere. Let's finish. That was my Quinn. And the old ones are everywhere. So let's finish with a great clue about the connection between the old ones and the Starks. We started our train of old ones quotes with Ned's gods being the old ones, the nameless, faceless gods of the greenwood they shared with the vanished children of the forest. So this is a good way to close the episode. The Starks are very much allied with the Night's Watch, both tactically and in terms of symbolism, and we've seen a lot of good last hero math applied to the statues of the Kings of Winter in the crypts. Bearing that in mind, check out Ned's conversation with Pycelle at King's Landing in A Game of Thrones.
My pardons, Lord Eddard. You did not come to hear foolish meanderings of a summer forgotten before your father was born. Forgive an old man his wanderings, if you would. Minds are like swords, I do fear. The old ones go to rust. Ah, and here's our milk. The serving girl placed the tray between them, and Pycelle gave her a smile. Sweet child. He lifted a cup, tasted, nodded. Thank you. You may go.
So first of all, Pycelle is comparing old mines to old swords and saying the old ones go to rust. But when one mentions rusty old swords in the presence of Ned Stark, descendant of the Kings of Winter, one naturally thinks of the iron long swords placed in the laps of the Kings of Winter statues, which, of course, all but the most recent have gone to rust. So associating the original Kings of Winter with the old ones makes perfect sense, of course, because based on our research today, the old ones, the Green Men, seem most strongly connected to the others and the Green Zombie Night's Watch. The Starks are tied to both those things. So again, finding whisperings of the old ones in the Winterfell crypts makes perfect sense. And it's another place tied to Brandon the Builder. The other notable thing in this scene is the ice milk Pycelle is serving Ned. When we looked at this scene in detail previously, it seemed to us that the iced milk they were drinking and the milk of the poppy that they were talking about were both stand-in symbols for weirwood paste. Just as Pycelle serves Ned ice milk here, he's the one to serve Ned milk of the poppy after Ned breaks his leg fighting Jaime's men in the streets of King's Landing, which then launches Ned into the Tower of Joy dream. Thus, Pycelle, with his mind labeled an old one, becomes a psychopomp figure serving a Stark hero, the food of the gods, which will make him dream. Pycelle is an old man who commands small children to bring the milk, and that compares well to Bloodraven, who has children of the forest serve Bran weirwood paste. And the idea of iced milk also implies ice transformation. So when you're talking about Kings of Winter, we're getting back at the idea of the Kings of Winter and the others being rooted in the Stark bloodline and in Green Seers. So there you go, guys. That's the episode for today. You wanted it. You needed it. Now you got it. And oh my, Sanri, what are we doing? You are on mute, but come back and tell me how much you loved the episode and then explain. Actually, there's nothing to explain. We'll just have to marvel at your spoopiness.
Yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of the parallels you raised and a lot of the questions and your others theory. I'm going to have to go through and re-listen again because sometimes I get a little bit distracted while I'm painting. But I am very excited about this train of thought is, I think, my overall takeaway.
This is some heavy weirwood ritual stuff here at the Crow Cages, isn't it, Silas?
Definitely. I like that you caught that there was 12 and then she's the 13th wolf. It's that kind of stuff I glaze over, but I'm always amazed when it's pointed out to me. So that was a nice little random and yet, big clue.
Yeah, that's Arya's most common role is Last Hero. She does Last Hero a lot.
Yeah.
So, and you can see like in her scenes, like in the Harrenhal Godswood, she goes into the Godswood, takes strength from the gods, and then goes out and along with Jaqen, murders a bunch of people and sets the Starks free. So it's very like the Last Hero getting the help of the children and then going and even her, in fact, her loosing the Starks from that dungeon is very much like resurrecting the green zombies. You're like taking them out of the underworld and making them your allies. So good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. And I like the whole thing about how they're imprisoned. Like they're so tightly in those crow cages, they can't move. So they're literally like Bloodraven. They're pinioned, but they're also flying because they're suspended. So
yeah. Or kind of like this was the 79 or 77 people like buried watching to the north in the wall. A little bit reminiscent of that as well, like captured way up high Not able to move, not able to leave.
Yeah, so I wonder if those 79 sentinels, they might be models of the others, because they're like Night's Watchmen who got locked in the ice and frozen and sort of betrayed the other ones. So I'll have to think about that more. I know they have, spears like tree trunks, and they're, quote, planted in the ice like plants.
Yeah.
So they're definitely like frozen green men. So yeah, I think they probably are others. What house was that from? The leader of it?
It's a good question. I can't remember right now. Someone probably knows.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. 79 sentinels, as Melanie said.
Riswell. And Riswell has, a black fiery horse sigil. A black horse with a red mane on orange and black.
We got a super chat, Elmo, and I don't know if you got to the other one yet.
Let's see. What was Howland Reed up to at the Isle of Faces? Tony asks. So that's a damn good question. Talking to the Green Men, and that's why we haven't seen them, is because Martin doesn't want to show us the Green Men yet. But when we get Howland Reed, RLJ is not the only thing he's going to tell us about, possibly. So hopefully we'll find out and get some Green Man corroboration. Raven Salix asks, so is the dragon locked in ice basically an other? Well, we've been calling him a good other this whole time, Raven. And it's kind of like the impregnation of the idea is, so the dragon locked in ice is symbolic of Night's king giving his fiery seed to Night's queen, and she then births others. So that's basically a different way of talking about Azor Ahai's fire sort of pushing out the others, but it's more of a creation act instead of an eviction there. So I'm not sure exactly how that's all related, but essentially the dragon locked in ice is supposed to become an other, but then he isn't. So we find him inside the ice, just like the green men who became others, but he's like rescued in time. So that's why he's like an ice and fire unity, I would say. What I'm interested is in the connection between the green zombies and the others. I've talked about that scene where Bannon on the Night's Watch freezes to death at the same time that Gilly gives birth to Monster in the loft above. So you've got a Night's Watchman freezing, and then an other baby being born at the same time. And then when Bannon is burned on the pyre, it looks like his body is sitting up and waking in the fire. So to me, it seems like that is showing us how first the others are created, and then the green zombies are created as a response. But they're really tied to sort of the same event. Like, I'm not sure how this all works exactly, but there's a couple of cool possibilities here.
For sure.
Thank you, Bridget Walsh, for the tip jar action. Sword in the Darkness says, could it be that as a face carved into a tree, a child of the forest is sacrificed? As a face is carved into a tree, a child of the forest is sacrificed so the tree can act as a conduit between the tree's newly opened eyes and the net. Yeah, it's possible. It could be a green man that's sacrificed to make that happen too. And that's kind of what I've been talking about. Like when I say Azor Ahai kills green men to invade the Weirwood net, that's the whole idea, is that like giving a tree a face allows people to go in, and you've got to wet that face with blood sacrifice. And that would be the green man that you're killing. So yeah, that's very possible. Sword in the Darkness. And it looks like another tip jar. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yes, we will get a lot more answers in the Winds of Winter for sure. I think we'll find out a lot more about this stuff. The Green Men, Zombie Night's Watch. We'll see John come back to life. Maybe we'll even get the Isle of Faces, although that could be in the last book. But,
it's tough to say. We'll get Howland Reed somewhere in there too. So he'll have experience with Isle of Faces, Tower of Joy, the Neck, its magic. I mean, it's going to tie a lot of this together.
Yep. that's one of the exciting things about this theory is like we're going to get to find out if there are stag boys. And I want to reiterate that there might not be. Okay, this whole thing about horned lords, we could just be talking about the oldest race of green seers. They could just be taller children. They might not have antlers. The antlers could be the headdress that they wear, like many shamans do. And George is just using the Cernunnos image there. But the point is, there is some other race of old green seers who are not the children. They're different. They're the green men. And whatever they are, they might just be the oldest first men. I don't know. We'll have to see. But there's something, and they're on the Isle of Faces, and we're going to get to see what they are. So, Sanri, let's take a minute to appreciate what's going on. I'm making my window bigger so I can see the detail here a little bit. You're muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry. I'm just putting some finishing touches on here, trying to polish it up. But I'm pretty happy with it. I think it turned out pretty neat.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's glowing with a sickly green light.
Yes.
Cool.
Creepy stag boys.
Yep.
I think this is kind of different from what you had in mind, but
It's a little different, but I mean, I didn't have anything. Just wanted to, let the ball roll and see what happens, see what you did with it. So it's cool.
cool.
Those are some evil-looking werewoods.
They are unhappy werewoods.
Yeah.
I'm
Like
not
the
sure
ones
why.
at Harrenhal.
Well, I mean, the Isle of Faces is just south of Harrenhal.
Yeah, there you go.
So think about Yeen, okay? At Yeen, there we have this city of oily black stone.
Yeah.
And then the jungle won't encroach on it. Like it grows up to it and then stops. And that's kind of what Sanri's drawn here. Is like the weirwoods are surrounding this thing.
Mhm.
Here's what I suspect. I suspect that if there's a black stone on the Isle of Faces, the weirwoods might be containing its effects. Like Westeros might look like a shy, for example, if not for the weirwoods being able to transmute the poison toxicity of the oily stone, because the roots of the weirwoods are described as grave worms. And there's a lot of grave worm symbolism about sort of digesting and consuming the rot and purifying things, So that could be what's going on with the weirwoods, is that they are transmuting the poison of this big black dick, big black oily stone dick that's sitting right here in the middle of this clearing. Yep, there it is.
It actually looks a lot less phallic than it did at the beginning. I have to
That's
say.
true. You made it pointy. Well, I mean, some. Oh wait, no, I shouldn't.
Stop. Family-friendly show, my friend.
No, it's not. It's not a family show anymore.
I
I just went for it there. Yeah, phrasing. Yeah. Well, in any case, you get the idea. They could be isolating the poison of the oily stone and preventing it from. I can't say anything now. I can't. It all sounds horrible. All right. Just as I walk through the living room, Bridget says, "All right, well, what can I say?"
Sorry, Bridget.
Oh no, we got Bridget in trouble.
Watch my YouTube get banned and taken down now.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it like that, guys. I swear.
I'm just an innocent meth head.
Meth head.
Otherwise,
Myth head. I mean, oh, damn it. Appeal denied. There we go. Well, nevertheless, like we said, monuments are phallic. That is what they are. And this is a grand monument. And here it is in the Isle of Faces.
Cha-cha-cha.
It's like it's definitely like a oily black stone lingam for sure.
Lingam. That's the word I was looking for. Lingam. Damn it. All right, cool. Well, it's 3:19. I think this is the place to stop.
All right.
So,
Great work,
Silas, give me your links. Tell everyone where you can find you.
Yeah, godsofterror.tumblr.com is where I've got a lot of essays on the connection between Lovecraft and George R. Martin and how he interweaves it into the stories. And I'm doing a new series on Nordic zombies and how that mythology is used too. So there's one part out. There'll be more out as soon as I find any time at all. You can find me on Twitter too. What's that?
As ASAP as possible.
Yeah, what's your Twitter?
It's Loki_president.
Excellent. Sandrixian?
I'm Sandrixian, and you can find me at Sandrixian on Twitter, and my web store is sandrixian.com. I have got a bunch of prints up there for sale. I think I still have 3 or 4 calendars left. I made a bad math mistake because that's not my specialty. So if you still are interested in one, there's a couple left. And yeah. I'm going to be on the Sansabration, and I'm super stoked for that.
Yeah, I guess I should hype that up. So next week, it's going to be between 2 Weirwoods. It is going to be the Sansabration. We are going to highlight some of the many underrated, awesome moments that are in Sansa's story, which are very easy to overlook. We started brainstorming on Twitter a couple months ago, and it turned out there's like so many. There's just like so many moments of Sansa awesome that are just very, like I said, easy to overlook. So we're going to have Wendy Nerd and Eliana and Sandrixian and
the Sansa
and Sansa Snark. Yes, that's right. She joined us too from Watchers on the Wall. So
she is great.
Yeah, she was on Joe Magician's stream recently with you, wasn't she?
Uh-huh.
Cool. So that will be next week. It's the Sansabration, and of course that's the Between Two Weirwoods channel, which is a different YouTube channel, so it won't be on this channel. It'll be on that one. And yeah, so that'll be fun. See you then. In 2 weeks, we might do a Q&A because I've been throwing out a lot of stuff and people have been sending me questions. So it might be time to catch up with an open Q&A. Jojo Lady Dane, I see you mentioning the Order of the Green Hand. So I mentioned them real quick when we were talking about Wyman Manderley. I'm going to mention a couple of Green Hand related stuff in that are connected to House Gardner in the next episode, I think. But there's not a ton about the Order of the Green Hand to say. I mean, maybe we can talk about it. I know they were maybe associated with being like wizards and dragon slayers and shit like that. So it might be worth looking into, but there's not a ton said about them. The main thing that I see George doing with the Order of the Green Hand is with Wyman Manderley. By making him a member of the Order of the Green Hand, he's showing you the under the sea thing, where you've got the Knight of the Green Hand, who's also a merman that lives under the sea. So there you go. So thanks, everybody. I will see you on Between Two Weirwoods next week. And that's it. Oh, I guess for those of you who are podcast listeners, I'm way behind. I still have not released the podcast from 2 weeks ago. I've almost got it done, and I'll try to get this one done a lot quicker. But what are you holding up there, Silas?
Oh, it's the dragon.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
Is that from Melanie Lot 7?
I got it at Ice and Fire con, but I can't remember the name of the person who made it.
Yeah, I have a phoenix from her.
Yeah.
I guess Melanie's not the only one who can who can do that, but I do have Lucerion here. So, anyways, the podcasts are coming. I've been behind, but I'll get it to you soon. So
awesome.
If you want to search past LML podcasts, you should join as a Patreon, but all the podcasts are on iTunes. And there was an error where the first few weren't showing. I fixed that. So they are all well, I got Lucerion on camera. We saw it, Melanie.
Nice.
I'll leave him on my shoulder. Anyways, they are all available now on iTunes, and you can also find them all on YouTube if you go backwards. And yeah, so there it is. Bye, guys.